At the Commonwealth Tribunal, Xiao opens on the worst possible sales pitch. The heroes meant to protect humanity have already been corrupted by unnameable forces. He is not begging for sympathy here. He is warning the very system that branded him a monster that sending him back will only feed the thing eating mankind. Inside the same judgment hall, a parliament official, part of the federal body that can erase a hero's status with one vote, tries to package exile as mercy. He tells Mask, the disgraced special hero in front of them, that he can leave with honor, then immediately adds that even this kindness bends the law because of his crimes. Very generous. If your idea of a gift comes with handcuffs and a receipt, then Xiao's certainty cracks, because this room is not just a courtroom to him. It is the place where his companions once judged and betrayed him. He asks what is happening, wonders if this is the memory that flashes before death, and then realizes the impossible. He has returned to the turning point. The choice waiting for Xiao is brutally simple. The hero's path means protecting humanity again under the same rules that condemned him, while the monster's path says saving mankind may require abandoning mankind's approval completely. A countdown makes the decision real. In 20 minutes, Xiao will be thrown into a random F-level environment. So this is not a philosophy class with better lighting. He understands he has been reborn, and the tribunal's exile verdict becomes the starting gun for his second life. The punishment lands with force, but Xiao does not flinch into submission. When the strike comes and someone calls it good, the meaning is clear. The authorities think they are finishing a criminal, while Xiao is already measuring the system that failed humanity once before. Around him, spectators reduce the whole catastrophe to gossip over beer, accusing the old hero of clinging to power and saying sacrifices demand a hanging. That matters because public opinion is not confused. It is hungry for a clean villain, and Xiao is the easiest plate on the table. So Xiao cuts their script in half and gives up the title of special hero himself. The crowd erupts, the official panics, and Xiao repeats the point plainly. If their hero system is this rotten, he will not keep pretending its badge means salvation. The parliament official tries to turn Xiao's refusal into childish protest, accusing him of disrespecting the resolution. Xiao only echoes one word: dissatisfaction, because that label is far too small for a man who knows the future these people are sleepwalking into. Then the real demand comes out. If Xiao gives up the title, Parliament wants his strength too. The title was the ribbon on the weapon, not the weapon itself, and now they are asking him to hand over the one thing that might still keep humanity alive. The reason everyone fears that strength is simple. Mask ranks far beyond ordinary heroes, and only he can touch a realm above them. Even Xiao, with future knowledge burning in his head, understands that power like this does not appear again neatly when civilization needs it. The official finally says the quiet part loud and orders Xiao to surrender all his powers. Xiao repeats the demand back, stunned for one breath, because this is the exact line between being humanity's obedient weapon and becoming the monster who refuses to be disarmed. The standoff finally breaks when Mask, the disgraced hero parliament, is trying to strip bare Shu's surrender over wasting breath on officials who already decided he is guilty. He says he gives up, but the way his power answers makes the room feel less like a courtroom and more like somebody pressed the wrong button on a machine labeled "Do Not Touch." The transfer does not look like a clean punishment, because power at Mask's level refuses to behave like a confiscated badge. It tears through the official process, drops a man from his chair, and suddenly the people demanding control are the ones begging for help. One official tastes the stolen strength and instantly understands why everyone feared Mask in the first place. He can barely resist kneeling, yet he still tries to act generous, offering to return what he demanded only after learning the toy has teeth. But the power is already loose, so the punishment meant to cage Mask becomes a disaster signal over the city. A force descends from above, civilians panic, and the authorities announce the worst possible translation. A king-class monster has arrived, which means this political trial just became a citywide survival problem. The king-class threat fully manifests over the city, and the shelter order turns from warning into reality. While ordinary people hide, Xiao stands in the wreckage and forces himself between humanity and the thing they accidentally invited. Because even condemned, he still understands the job better than the men holding the paperwork. Xiao manages to resist for 10 minutes before the borrowed force finally scatters. And that limit matters. He has future knowledge, nerve, and skill, but his body is still human. The enemy reads that weakness too and decides there is no reason to fear him, which is a bold thing to say right before ordering everyone forward. Xiao does not answer with a speech. He prepares to move, because his whole path is now being decided by what he can survive without permission. A masked figure raises a mask-like object. A blonde attacker threatens death if he does not leave, and Xiao's response is simple enough to bruise an ego. He vanishes from the man's reach before the threat can land. Back at the earlier Secret Realm raid, Xiao is no longer standing as a condemned spider, but as a weakened level 1 nobody, with no career, which makes this the turning point he regrets to change. Captain, the squad leader, briefs the hunters that their target is a secret realm guarded by human-sized level 3 spiders, and he expects a steel-cutting squad of level 2+ members to clear it fast. When fear of spiders comes up, the hunters try to talk tough, and Xiao refuses to be treated like dead weight before the raid even starts. The chatter drifts to Mask's trial happening that same day, tying this little mission to the public betrayal outside, but Captain cuts it off and orders everyone to work together and clear the realm quickly. Inside the secret realm, Xiao and Captain's squad cross the portal knowing this is not a training room with mood lighting. It is a timed death trap. If they fail to clear it, the realm can harden into permanent reality, which means one bad mission can become everyone else's geography problem. The squad immediately clocks the problem with Xiao. He enters with no weapon, no gear, and the confidence of a man who skipped every safety pamphlet on purpose. When an armored hunter asks what he plans to fight with? Xiao raises his fist and makes it clear that his body is the weapon. That would sound bold from a veteran, but Xiao is only level 1, so the squad treats his confidence like a clerical error with legs. Xiao does not back down, because his goal is not to impress them, it is to crush the monster and prove that skill still matters even before a career path gives him power. Xiao walks deeper into the realm alone, choosing the dangerous route over being babysat at the entrance. The others warn him they will not rescue him if he dies, which is a very charming team-building exercise. Then they move forward because the realm still has to be cleared. The first real fight breaks out, and the squad learns the realm is not waiting politely for their formation to settle. A teammate's attack fails to end the threat, so Captain has to step in fast, proving why he leads this team and why careless newcomers die here. Captain finishes the monster himself and stands over the aftermath, but the wind does not make him softer. His cold attitude comes from experience, because secret realms punish mistakes with bodies, not warning stickers. Yanchi, a young level 2 healer, softens the squad's rough welcome by explaining things properly to Xiao. Her polished way of speaking catches Xiao's attention, and she realizes she has been giving survival advice before even introducing herself. Xiao introduces himself plainly as a level 1 professional who has not chosen a career path yet, which shocks Yan Qianqian more than his attitude did. She immediately advises him to stop pretending close combat suits him and test his spirituality instead, because in this world, choosing the wrong path can get a weak hunter buried before his story starts moving. Inside the secret realm, Yan Qianqian's advice barely has time to land before Xiao senses the real lesson crawling in. A shadow spider attacks first, so Xiao protects himself and names the threat immediately, which tells Yan Qianqian this level 1 newcomer understands monsters far better than his profile says. Xiao chooses to meet the shadow spider head-on, not to show off, but to prove that being underleveled does not mean being helpless. He finishes it through timing, anatomy, and control, while Yan Shanshan watches a supposed beginner do work that trained martial professionals would need a receipt to explain. The kill confirms the most important thing for Xiao. Walking the spider path has not broken the leveling system. That means his new route is dangerous, ugly, and still usable, which is exactly the kind of terrible bargain our boy came back for. Deeper in the secret realm, Xiao keeps pushing the group forward, and his speed forces everyone else to treat him less like dead weight and more like the person setting the pace. When he warns that the boss waits ahead, the team adjusts around his read, with one fighter assigned to burn through the spider silk so they can reach the fight cleanly. Outside the secret realm now, public attention drifts to Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power after Parliament condemned him. One commentator says the trial ending can be skipped. Then the talk turns to rumors about Mask's hidden face and the Tuga City massacre, where an infectious demon turned citizens into monsters and Mask killed them as a last resort. The crowd does not want nuance though, so a witness who once supported Mask gets accused of being a paid actor, which is a very tidy way to dodge an ugly fact. Back inside the secret realm, Xiao's team reaches the boss arena with confidence that now feels earned instead of reckless. The spider boss guards both danger and profit, so even the treasure chest and corpse value become part of the calculation, since survival jobs still have bills attached. The boss attacks, and the whole trial stops being a neat dungeon run and becomes a survival test. Xiao reads the spider's poor intelligence, which matters more than raw force, because a dumb spider can be baited, punished, and taken apart before it turns the team into cave decoration. Xiao reads the spider boss correctly and commits to a simple plan: match the right teammates against the right weakness, then end it before the creature adapts. The coordinated assault works, and the beast finally goes down, which proves Xiao is not just strong, he is already treating this trial like a system to exploit. Captain, the team leader trying to keep the raid orderly, laughs off the danger and starts talking rewards as if the level 3 secret realm is already cleared. Then the missing treasure chest ruins the celebration, which is the dungeon equivalent of the cashier saying the bill is not finished yet. Still inside the boss arena, a teammate senses something ahead, and the team finds a winged girl-like creature wearing an astronaut helmet. Captain understands the ugly truth first. The spider was only a gatekeeper, and this strange creature is the real secret realm boss. That reveal changes the whole raid from a clean victory into a trap, because a hidden boss means the realm has been hiding its real pressure until the team relaxed. Even the comment comparing it to a more oppressive giant threat lands for one reason. This boss may look odd, but the danger has just moved up a floor without asking anyone's permission. Elsewhere in the same dangerous chain of conflict, Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, fights like a man who has no room left for mercy. He forces his way through the monster's restraints, but the struggle immediately shows the problem. Raw aggression is not enough when the opponent can absorb, bind, and answer back. Mask keeps escalating, and every burst of power buys him only a little space before the creature pins him back into a harder choice. He recognizes the enemy is not easy to deal with, which matters because a veteran like Mask does not say that unless the fight has already become expensive. So Mask stops testing and goes for execution, ordering the enemy to die while compressing everything into one killing strike. The attack lands, but the target's desperate plea comes too late, which is a brutal reminder that in this world, hesitation has terrible timing. Back in the cavern, two figures rush out and call to mass, but the crisis has already spilled past conversation. Fire floods the battlefield, and the team realizes the hidden boss is not a reward check, it is the real survival exam. The defenders try to force the flames back, but the winged boss rises above the burning field and turns the whole arena into its territory. That is the real turn. Xiao's team no longer controls the raid pace, and winning now means surviving a boss that fights like the room itself belongs to it. The soldiers watching from the cavern can only react in anger and panic as the attack keeps keep spreading, because the clean raid plan has collapsed in front of them. When another fighter is hurled through the fire screaming, the cost becomes obvious. If Xiao does not reach for something beyond normal human strength, this secret realm will chew through the team one body at a time. Inside the burning secret realm, the team finally understands this is no longer a raid, it is a countdown with teeth. A wounded fighter forces out Drake's scans through the pain, trying to read the boss before panic turns the squad into loose luggage with helmets. One furious fighter snaps and tries to charge Lao Chi, but the armored ally stops him before Grief gets another person killed. The warning is blunt. After what this level 4 monster just proved, rushing in means donating a body, not changing the fight. So the survivors settle on the only plan that still sounds human. The secret realm portal opens in 3 hours, which means they fight backward, reach the entrance, and escape the moment the door unlocks. The goal shifts from victory to staying alive long enough for the exit to exist. The monster immediately punishes that plan by reaching for the retreat line instead of waiting for them to organize. Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, moves into the attack path, but the creature keeps forcing the team to react instead of run. Captain, the field leader trying to keep everyone alive, gets pulled into the monster's control zone, while an ally tries to grab him back. That rescue attempt only proves how bad the advantage is, because the boss can turn one trapped soldier into bait for the next. The onlookers recoil as the creature survives the punishment and shows it still has more to reveal. This is the new terror of the secret realm. Even when the team thinks they have broken through, the boss is still only opening the second drawer. A soldier braces against the next attack and curses the Drake technique, but courage does not fix a level gap. The collision throws the whole battle into chaos, and Xiao steps in with his full strength only to learn the worst answer possible. His best human strike cannot injure the level 4 monster. The monster catches Xiao and turns his own arm into the price of hesitation. Mask appears beside him and demands the sword, explaining the ugly math clearly. If Xiao wants to live, he has to let Mask cut the trapped arm free. Xiao freezes because this choice is not just about pain, it is about admitting normal methods have already failed. He breaks down for a second, then accepts the cost, and that resignation says more than any speech. Survival in this realm is going to take pieces from him. With Xiao buying the opening, Mask takes the sword and turns the fight back toward the boss. For the first time, the team stops scrambling and forces the monster to answer them, which is a nice change from being handled like practice dummies with breathing problems. But the monster reveals its true form, and the brief momentum dies fast. Xiao and Mask regroup in the cave, knowing the real trial has only begun. If they cannot break past this form, the 3-hour escape plan becomes a very organized funeral schedule. Inside the cave, Yan Xiao, the healer from the secret realm, finally cracks under the boss monster's pressure and admits what everyone is trying not to say. He does not want to die here. That fear is exactly what the creature wants, which turns the whole escape plan into a trap with excellent customer service and terrible morals. Xiao realizes the monster let its prey run on purpose, because God-chosen beasts feed on human negativity like fear, jealousy, and resentment. So every second the team panics, the enemy grows stronger, which means surviving now is not about courage speeches, it is about refusing to become dinner with feelings. Xiao shuts down the panic by reminding them he has killed God-chosen beasts before, even when he was powerless. The boss answers by exposing a worse true form, and the message is clear: this realm is no longer testing whether they can fight, it is testing whether they can stay human while something harvests their terror. Yan Xiao chooses not to freeze, and he throws up a poison-repelling spell with the others before the monster can turn the air itself against them. It is not a win yet, but it buys the one thing Xiao needs most: a few breaths to read the enemy instead of dying politely. The beast completes its transformation, expecting Xiao to collapse like every other victim, but Xiao stays standing and calls out the confusion directly. That matters because Xiao may be physically weakened after regression, but his spirit and soul still carry the level of the monster killer he used to be. Xiao notices the boss's spiritual pressure has dropped, so the monster's true form is not just stronger, it is also more exposed. He seizes that opening and awakens a new ability, turning the enemy's attempt to devour him into the first real step on his monster's path. Xiao even thanks the beast for clearing away the weaker enemies, because now there is nothing left between him and the serious fight he needs. Then he lets the new power take shape, and our boy stops looking like a trapped survivor and starts looking like the hazard sign everyone ignored. The monster pushes back hard enough to throw Xiao off balance, proving the transformation is not a free victory button. Xiao recovers anyway and keeps pressing, because losing here means the cave becomes a grave for Mask, Yan Xiao, and the entire 3-hour plan. Xiao adapts in the middle of the fight, using the monster's own confidence against it until he finally lands a decisive hit. The boss can still endure punishment, but the advantage has shifted. Xiao is no longer reacting to the trial. He is forcing the trial to react to him. Xiao pours everything into a finishing push, but the enemy mocks the move as too simple and calls it a complete failure. That insult lands because it means Xiao's new monstrous power is real, but still crude, and this survival trial is about to demand an even uglier choice. The trial boss sizes Xiao up and decides the problem is not Xiao's courage, it is his level. Xiao is only a level 4 god chosen, so the boss treats his potential like a future problem, not a present threat, which is a dangerous insult to hand a man who learns mid-fight. That beating forces Xiao into the choice this whole realm has been cornering him towards: stay human and die clean, or draw on the monster path and survive dirty. He chooses survival, and his body starts crossing a line he cannot politely uncross later. Xiao's transformation finally turns the fight into something the boss has to respect, because Xiao stops fighting like a desperate low-level survivor and starts fighting like a creature built for the realm's rules. The cost is obvious. Every bit of power that keeps him alive also drags him farther from the humanity he claims he wants to save. But the boss still has enough strength to punish him, and Xiao gets thrown back before his new form can become an easy answer. The trial is making its point with both hands. Monstrous power helps, but it does not make him untouchable. So when the boss taunts him about humans finally getting their turn, Xiao answers with the ugly version of resolve. He presses through the punishment and turns the monster path into a weapon, not because it is noble, but because dying here would leave everyone depending on him with nothing but a very dramatic corpse. Outside the secret realm, the system ends the trial by declaring that survivors will be transported out, which means the realm has judged who gets to live and who gets left behind. When the others wake from the pressure-induced coma, they make it out, but Xiao is missing, and that absence hits harder than the victory. Back in the city afterward, Xiao reappears alive, which answers the worst fear, but opens a much smaller and more humiliating problem. Where does a monster-slaying regressor sleep tonight? He starts looking for housing in Dahe City, a city built only 40 years after the disaster, and immediately learns that one room costs 3,000 Union dollars a month. Saving mankind is one thing, rent wants paperwork. Yan Xiao, the healer from the secret realm, spots him before he can drown in rental listings and makes sure he remembers her name properly. Her question cuts straight to his weakness outside combat. Xiao can survive a death trial, but normal civilian life is a boss fight with receipts. Dahe City's rapid growth has left old residential pockets rotting inside the modern city, and that is where Yan Xiao leads Xiao. The place matters because it offers him shelter, but it also shows the kind of fragile civilian life his grand monster path decisions are supposed to protect. Yan Xiao points out her father's retirement medal, then admits the family grew up hearing stories she still cannot fully prove. When Xiao asks where her father is, the answer turns the medal from decoration into damage. War ruined his vitality. He died after discharge, and her mother died giving birth to her sister. Inside Yan Xiao's family home, shelter comes with very practical boundaries. Yan Xiao can find Xiao a quilt, but he has to buy his own underwear and pajamas. It is a tiny civilian problem, which is almost funny after Secret Realm survival, except it reminds Xiao that saving humanity still includes awkward errands and borrowed rooms. Yan Xiao then brings Xiao into the house properly, and the younger sibling immediately treats the new wheelchair-bound guest like a security breach with hair. Yan Xiao explains that Xiao met her in the secret realm, just arrived in Dahe City, and has nowhere else to stay, so he only needs a few days under their roof. The younger sibling's hostility is not random. Yan Xiao quietly tells Xiao this child is good at heart, but panics around strangers. That matters because Xiao is trying to hide among ordinary people, and this house is already showing him how fragile ordinary trust can be. At dinner, Yan Xiao apologizes because the meal is simple, but Xiao accepts it like a luxury. He remembers the border where soldiers survived on unseasoned monster meat without rice, and back then even terrible food felt bearable because they believed they were fighting the darkness for mankind. Compared to that, a plain home-cooked table is basically a 5-star restaurant with chopsticks. Then the television drags the outside world into the room. Professor Zhang, a public commentator speaking about Mask's trial, tells citizens to trust Parliament, the federal governing body that convicted Mask and stripped his status. Professor Zhang pushes the theory that Mask only pretended to lose power to hide his crimes, while another speaker argues humans do not need Mask at all, because collective human achievement can carry civilization forward without him. That broadcast matters because Mask, the disgraced hero who once protected people through the darkest years, is being rewritten as a criminal, while Xiao listens from the exact kind of civilian home heroes are supposed to protect. A woman with glasses questions whether Mask really absconded, but the doubt does not stop the pressure closing in on the Yan family. Right outside the house, Kaijang Investment finally shows its teeth. This is the company that has pressured the Yan family for 4 years to sell their home for development. When one of their men threatens to burn the place down, the Yan family blocks the door, which turns a property dispute into a direct attack on the only shelter Xiao has found. Kaijang's men confront Yan Xiao and make the message painfully clear. Her team is broken, people are dead, Captain is in danger, and her old support system is gone. Because Kaijang has government connections and financial leverage, they believe Yan Xiao has no way left to resist, so they give her 5 days before things get ugly. The offer is not negotiation, it is humiliation. Land once valued at 3 million federal dollars suddenly becomes worth 100,000 the moment Kaijang decides Yan Xiao is vulnerable. Yan Xiao refuses anyway, and when the businessman notices Xiao behind her, the whole threat quietly gains a new problem in a blue jacket. Tu Jing, Kaijang Investment's security chief and the harasser sent to force compliance, introduces himself like a contract can make extortion polite. He reaches for a handshake with Yan Xiao, but the agreement he thinks he is sealing is really the moment Xiao sees exactly how the powerful prey on civilians when monsters are not even in the room. At Yan Xiao's home in Dahe City, Xiao has one shelter for now, but the price of stepping into civilian life is seeing how Kaijang Investment hunts people without needing claws or fangs. Tu Jing thinks a handshake will let him bully Yan Xiao up close, until someone warns that this security chief is not just muscle, he uses mental attacks. Tu Jing takes the handshake as his opening and dives straight for Xiao's mind, already celebrating like the paperwork is signed. Bad choice of target, Xiao's whole second life is built on surviving things that eat sanity for breakfast, so this ambush is less clever than Tu Jing thinks. Tu Jing plans to invade Xiao's mental world and break him completely, but the moment he enters, his confidence starts leaking out. He expects a victim's mind and finds a flooded nightmare deep enough to make a mental specialist ask for directions. protections. Inside Xiao's mental world, Tujing realizes the problem is not that Xiao has defenses, it is that Xiao's mind is a trap wearing a human face. He tries to force his way through anyway, so the water swallows him and turns his own invasion into a drowning lesson. Tujing finally understands he has been submerged in Xiao's mental power from the start, which means he never controlled this fight at all. When Xiao's inner world answers him as a monster, the harasser learns the ugly truth. The guy in the blue jacket is not protected by humanity's rules anymore. Back in the real world at Yan Xiao's home, Tujing's body grabs Xiao by the throat, but his mind is already the one choking. Yan Xiao can only stare as the bully who came to pressure her family collapses under a battle nobody else can see. Kaijang's men scramble to understand what Xiao is, and one of them openly asks whether he is on Yan Xiao's side after Tujing falls apart for opposing him. When they guess Xiao might be level 3, the room changes fast, since intimidation stops working once the supposed victim may outrank the hired threat. Kaijang's representative tries to save face by praising Yan Xiao for finding a powerful backer, then warns her the company is not finished. He also threatens consequences if Xiao keeps touching their people, which is rich coming from a crew that walked in treating a family home like a vending machine with walls. Yan Xiao asks Yao whether he really made Tujing faint, because from her side, this went from handshake to body drop with no instruction manual. Xiao keeps it blunt. He did not go looking for harm. Tujing forced his way into Xiao's mind and paid the entry fee. With the harassers pushed back, Xiao asks how long Yan Xiao has been trapped under Kaijang's pressure, and the answer explains why she looks so cornered. Yan Xiao says it started 4 years ago after her father died, when Kaijang Investment began trying to buy the house for development instead of taking no for an answer. Yan Xiao lays out the cost of being ordinary in a world where power decides what law means. They tried break-ins, threatened Yan Shenshen, her level 2 healer sister, and only backed off when Yan Xiao gained enough status to scare them privately. The harassment quieted, but it never ended, which tells Xiao exactly how useless polite protection can be. When the conversation turns to government help and special treatment for descendants, Xiao does not buy the comforting version of the system. His point is simple. If official favor actually protected people like Yan Xiao, Kaijang's people would not still be standing at her door 4 years later. Xiao's solution sounds colder than charity. Instead of pretending preference fixes anything, he argues that wealth and privilege should be treated with the same harsh pressure they use on everyone else. This is the worldview he brought back from the apocalypse, where mercy for predators just gives them time to reload. Later, inside Yan Xiao's home, Xiao helps with the dishes, and his reasoning is almost painfully practical. He lives there, eats there, so he works there. For a man choosing the monster's path, he still understands kitchen math, which may be the most human thing he does all day. Yan Xiao thanks Xiao for driving the harassers away, and admits she does not know what she would have done without him, turning his temporary shelter into something heavier than a room to sleep in. Xiao does not bask in it. He turns the question back to her, because if he is going to protect people on his own terms, he needs to know what they are actually facing next. Still inside Yan Xiao's home, Yan Xiao, the healer from the secret realm, admits her protection is hanging by a thread. If Captain Song does not wake soon, she has to find another reliable party. That tells Xiao the harassment problem is not just some loud punks at the door. It is a civilian survival problem with no stable backup. Xiao thinks about the ugly loophole behind every secret realm. Federal law forbids humans from killing each other inside, but law without enforcement is basically a locked door made of paper. He has already chosen the monster's path, so he does not expect rules to save anyone anymore. So Xiao turns shelter into leverage and growth into a job, taking a level 4 Night Dweller's secret realm that demands he clear it alone after 12 hours of preparation. The reward might bring money and power, but the real point is colder. If he wants to protect people without begging society for permission, he needs strength no party can veto. Inside the new dungeon, Xiao studies the place instead of rushing in, reading the medieval fortress layout for traps and enemy patterns. This is a higher risk dungeon, and he treats the hallway like a contract with teeth, which is fair when the decor starts looking too expensive to be harmless. The dungeon answers him with stone gargoyles, enemies that wait as statues until prey gets close. Xiao recognizes the problem immediately. These things have bodies hard enough to shrug off both physical force and magic, which means an ordinary team would pay for every mistake in blood. That realization hits Xiao personally, because if Yan Xiao's Iron team ran into these gargoyles, they would likely suffer heavy casualties. Then the dungeon piles on with dark-winged demons, forcing Xiao to stop thinking like a protector watching from the edge and start surviving like the monster he decided to become. The demons manage to swarm and bind him, which would be the end for a normal challenger. Xiao's answer is to let the monstrous power out, and the moment he breaks free, the fight changes from a rescue problem into a warning label with a pulse. Deeper in the cathedral-like chamber, more demons rise and stack the battlefield against him, trying to bury him under numbers. Xiao does not retreat, he challenges all of them at once, proving this dungeon is not training him to be cleaner, only stronger. Xiao's monster form wins the exchange, and the demon swarm collapses under the kind of force a public hero could never explain politely. When the destruction settles, the victory matters for one reason. He can clear threats that would shred civilian teams, but every win makes him look less human doing it. Later at the same dungeon entrance, another team arrives believing the roach should be untouched, since the dungeon appeared less than 12 hours ago, and the inspection bureau supposedly sealed it before anyone entered. Their leader is trying to trust the official process, which is adorable for about 3 seconds. But the team scout notices the truth first. Someone already came through before them, and that stranger fought at close range. The cracked stone fragments are not random damage. They show weapon-like force delivered up close, meaning the sealed dungeon was never as sealed as promised. Then the scout finds the real nightmare clue, a stone statue torn apart by bare hands. Like the gargoyle's body stopped being stone the moment Xiao touched it. The leader can barely process it, because if someone can rip those enemies apart without tools, the team is not following a normal challenger. They are walking behind a monster wearing a human name. Inside the already cleared secret realm, the inspection team stops pretending this is normal when another member backs the scout's read. The damage points to a person, not a random realm malfunction. Then a massive stone and bone guardian rises from the debris with a rifle, which turns their evidence hunt into a very immediate reminder that even the leftovers here can still kill people. At the inspection bureau, the officials are getting cooked from above because a disaster this big has produced no culprit, no method, and no comforting paperwork. 7 separate teams report the same impossible result. By the time they enter their realms, every enemy inside had already been wiped out. That means the thief is not merely lucky, he is bypassing the Bureau's monitoring and entering secret realms without authorization. The Bureau's fear escalates fast, because if insiders are helping him, this stops being a theft case and starts threatening the Federation's entire control system. The officials admit the uncomfortable part out loud. Killing monsters is useful, but an unregistered powerhouse could ambush registered teams just as easily. Their whole bureau exists because the old pre-bureau years taught humanity that humans can be as dangerous as the things outside the walls, which is a depressing lesson to need twice. Their analyst narrows the pattern to 1 infiltrator starting from the level 4 gargoyle realm, because every cleared realm carries the same brutal signature. A full team would leave different wound patterns and tactics, but this looks like one person solving every problem with the same hands-on approach, which is efficient in the least reassuring way possible. The Bureau also realizes the thief cannot possibly use all the materials he has taken, so he must be selling the spoils somewhere. That deduction matters because Xiao, the condemned future savior now building power outside the rules, has already turned the official blind spot into cash. Back in Dahe City, the city where Xiao is hunting for housing, he walks away from the trader counting his money and realizing he probably undersold the realm materials again. Still, the system keeps rewarding completed tasks, so profit is secondary to the real prize. Every cleared objective pushes him closer to the strength he needs to save humanity his way. Xiao counts the money toward rent at Yan Xiao's house, but the number annoys him because 3,200 is too low for what he risked. For a man trying to become strong enough to outgrow human law, he is still stuck doing landlord math, which is a painfully human boss fight. At a weapon shop in Dahe City, Yan Xiao, the healer from the secret realm, who is now tied to Xiao's housing problem, brings in her father's old long sword and explains it once killed many monsters. The equipment appraiser immediately insults it as scratched scrap worth barely anything, and Yan Xiao takes the hit personally, because this is not just metal to her, it is family memory. The appraiser drops the act once he thinks Yan Xiao does not understand the blade's value. After 30 years around equipment, he recognizes forged ember iron inside it. Extracting that rare secret realm material could bring more than 10,000, so his low offer was not expertise. It was a robbery wearing a shop apron. The negotiation locks up as Yan Xiao and the appraiser both hold the blade, and the whole room turns into a quiet tug of war over her father's legacy. Yan Xiao says she wants it back, but the appraiser tests whether Xiao intends to buy it, because now the hidden value is on the table. Xiao steps in with the confidence of someone who knows exactly what the blade really is, and his posture tells the appraiser that cheating Yan Xiao is no longer a free activity. Then Xiao offers enough money to stun both of them, changing the argument from whether the blade is scrap to whether anyone here can afford to refuse him. Yan Xiao refuses to take full price and says 1,500 is the most she will charge, because Xiao has already saved her life more than once. Xiao pushes the money back as food and lodging expenses, using his place as her benefactor to make accepting it feel less like charity and more like settlement. Then Xiao reveals the real reason he will not haggle. The blade is worth far more than 10,000, though he cannot explain why yet. Yan Xiao answers that the weapon has been strange since childhood, full of secrets like Xiao himself, and she promises not to pry about what she saw in the spider's secret realm or his sudden wealth. Yan Xiao's only condition is simple. Xiao must be kind to Flying Crow, because the blade is her father's last legacy. That request turns the purchase into a trust, and Xiao is not just buying a weapon now. He is accepting the weight of someone else's final memory. Xiao studies Flying Crow and understands why Yan Xiao's father named it that. A blade meant to vanish into darkness, then move freely when it matters. For Xiao, that name is not decoration. It is exactly the kind of weapon a man needs when he has chosen to protect humanity from the shadows. Yan Xiao, the healer from the secret realm, finally opens the wound behind the blade. Her father died in a demon incident where the army and heroes were crushed. 90 registered professionals fell, and Flying Crow was the only thing that came back. That loss explains why she abandoned close combat and became a healer instead, choosing the profession that gave her the best chance to survive, where her father did not. Now that Yan Xiao has said it out loud, the deal stops feeling like a trade and starts feeling like a confession she has been carrying too long. She tells Xiao she feels lighter and wants to head back, which means Xiao leaves with more than a rare blade. He leaves with someone's trust tied to his waist. Elsewhere in Dahe City, the officials hunting the secret realm thief try to turn rumor into a trail. One suited investigator doubts they can actually find the hidden realm, but another insists their doctor's analysis is enough. A thief with stolen goods needs a convenient place to sell, so they move to catch him before he disappears again. Back at the Yan family home, that outside investigation collides with danger at the worst possible time. Yan Xiao hears a violent knock that is neither her sister Yan Xinshen nor Xiao, and before she can make sense of it, the door gets smashed open like rent is overdue, and patience has left the building. Yan Xiao wheels herself out with flying crow in hand because waiting helplessly is not an option anymore. 3 Kaijiang investment attackers from the company that has pressured the Yan family for years to sell their house close in and immediately reveal this is not a visit. It is an intimidation job. The Kaijiang leader insults Yan Xiao as a cripple, and that cruelty gets the answer it deserves when she swings the blade at him in a burst of rage. But the gap between courage and combat ability is brutal. He blocks her, praises the strike like he is grading homework, then throws her back hard enough to end the resistance in seconds. Yan Xiao hits the ground and hides behind what little cover she can find, which tells the real story. The attackers are not here because she is dangerous. They are here because she is vulnerable. The Kaijiang leader confirms the problem for his side too, reporting that Xiao and Yan Shanshan are missing, so the easy kidnapping target is the only one left in the house. One subordinate worries that taking Yan Xiao will backfire, but the Kaijiang leader cares more about leaving a lesson than avoiding consequences. An authority above him approves the plan, and the leader turns the kidnapping into a staged accident, handing over truck keys and ordering his man to ram the yard with a garbage load as cover, which is a very neat legal theory if everyone involved has never met a court. Outside in the rain, Xiao arrives with Yan Shanshan, the level 2 healer whose calm words usually do more work than a weapon, and they immediately sense something is wrong. A watching figure at the window and Yan Shanshan's alarm make the danger plain. The attack has reached the home before Xiao can keep it separate from the people he is trying to protect. So Xiao and Yan Xinshin choose to enter instead of retreating, stepping into the house ready for whatever Kaijiang left inside. This is the turn Xiao keeps running into again and again. If enemies can reach his home, then defending room by room is not enough, and the source of the trouble has to be removed. Outside Yan Xiao's home in the rain, Kaijiang's operative does not come to negotiate, he comes to humiliate. The truck crew pretends they have the wrong address, then calls the house a garbage dump, which tells Xiao exactly what this first gift from our company really is. Intimidation with paperwork nowhere in sight. Yan Xiao wants to rush over, but Xiao stops her because charging into that insult only gives Kaijiang more control over her pain. He watches her walk away through the rain, and the choice lands hard. Xiao is done treating these attacks as separate accidents when they all come from the same source. Inside the house, Yan Xiao asks the question people only ask after they run out of comforting answers. Why is the world like this? Xiao does not dress it up for her, because this is the belief that has been dragging him away from humanity since his regression. Justice is not waiting around to be discovered. Xiao tells Yan Xiao, fairness is something people build out of unfairness, not something the world hands over for free. Even the rain falls on the suffering and the guilty alike, which is a miserable weather report and an even worse moral system. That lesson breaks into action when Yan Xiao's grief turns violent, and Xiao stands in the rain with his weapon like a man who has already chosen the ugly answer. Trouble keeps finding him at home, so he decides the home is not what needs defending anymore. The troublemaker is what needs removing. When Yan Xiao asks where he is going, Xiao gives the simple answer Kaijiang should have feared. He is going to eliminate them. Yan Xiao panics because Kaijiang is not some street gang. It has level 3 and level 4 fighters, even a level 5 threat, meaning Xiao is walking into a grinder on purpose. Xiao does not back down because his philosophy has sharpened into something brutal. If boring trouble keeps returning, he will answer it with boring violence until it stops. It is not noble, but it is clear. And clarity is exactly what Kaijiang bought itself with that truck stunt. At Kaijiang's corporate building, the people behind the pressure are still shaking hands over redevelopment money, treating the Yan family's home like a line item. That is the turn in the civil arc. While they celebrate cooperation, Xiao arrives to turn their comfortable business deal into a containment incident. Xiao walks through the glass doors armed, and the lobby instantly understands that this is not a complaint filing. The suited men bark at him to put the weapon away, while one woman tries to stop the escalation, which is brave, late, and very bad timing. Xiao charges forward anyway, and the fight stops being about property the moment his system declares the mission. Blood Sacrificial Blade. Blood Raven, the monstrous blade tied to Xiao's darker path, is now being used to eliminate every hostile being. So Xiao is not just raiding Kaijiang, he is proving he will let monster power solve human problems. Kaijiang's fighters finally confront him in the hallway, but by then Xiao has already crossed the line they expected him to fear. They surround him to protect the company, and Xiao launches into them because the source of the trouble is standing right there with swords in hand. Inside Kaijiang now, a guard warns Xiao that hostile intruders are closing in, which is almost funny since Xiao is the hostile intruder everyone should be warning about. 4 Kaijiang fighters draw weapons to stop him, but Xiao treats the ambush as proof that the company chose force first, so he answers in the language they understand. The first fighter rushes him to end this quickly, but Xiao holds his ground and exposes the gap between a paid enforcer and a man who has survived the end of the world once already. The exchange turns brutal fast, and by the time the fighter falls, Xiao has shown Kaijang that numbers will not buy safety here. Then Blood Raven, Xiao's monstrous blade, takes the spotlight, and the civil fight becomes something uglier than self-defense. Xiao strikes down the next man without hesitation, proving he is willing to let monster power punish human corruption if that is what saving people now requires. The battle spills through Kaijang's building as more armed employees try to contain him, but every fresh body they send only confirms how deep the company is willing to dig its own grave. Xiao keeps moving forward, and the men advancing on him start to look less like backup and more like a queue with bad benefits. Elsewhere inside Kaijang, the company's leaders discuss the House of Two Sisters, the Yan family's property, like it is already theirs. They want redevelopment profits, and if the owners resist, they are ready to use dirtier methods, which explains exactly why Xiao came here with a blade instead of a complaint form. That confidence cracks when a report arrives. One intruder has killed many people in the lobby, and nobody can process how a single attacker dares hit Kaijang head-on. The leader falls back on Kaijang's usual logic, target the vulnerable and avoid high-level professionals, then decides to see the disaster himself because the problem has already climbed into his house. Back on the stairs, Kaijang's men finally understand that Xiao is not here to negotiate, and one of them begs for his life. Xiao still unleashes Blood Raven, and the staircase becomes the cost of Kaijang's greed in the most literal accounting report possible. A stronger team finally confronts him, led by a blonde level 4 professional, one of Kaijang's high-end fighters brought in to stop disasters regular guards cannot handle. He threatens Xiao with surrender, but another leader recognizes Xiao as the man who appeared at Yan Xiao's house, which turns this from a break-in into a personal crisis for Kaijang. Xiao measures the room and sees 3 level 4 professionals, which means staying fully human will make this fight messy and slow, so he chooses the monster's path on purpose, accepting that the more power he uses, the harder it becomes to pretend he still belongs among ordinary people. The professionals realize Xiao is not attacking like a normal fighter, so one activates night vision to erase the darkness as an advantage. That should give him control of the battlefield, but instead he notices something wrong at his feet, and the hunter suddenly sounds like the person who walked into the trap. The trap springs before the professionals can regroup, and shock replaces confidence as Xiao's monstrous form emerges behind them. This is the turn Kaijang cannot survive. They prepared for a criminal with a weapon, but Xiao has decided to become the monster strong enough to kill their entire system. The last Kaijang professional reaches for dual pistols, which tells the whole story. The squad came to erase Xiao quietly, and now survival is down to whatever metal fits in 2 hands. Over comms, another fighter calls for Joseph and catches the scent of blood, so the team finally understands this is no longer a hunt. It is a containment failure wearing their payroll badge. Joseph, one of Kaijang's surviving professionals, finds the truth first when Xiao's monstrous power pins a victim and closes in on him next. Joseph blocks just fast enough to stay alive, but his own panic gives away the cost. One slower breath, and he joins the wall decoration. He answers with ice arrow art, not to win cleanly, but to buy a second from something that should not be this hard to kill. The ice strike lands and tears through the room, so for one precious moment, Joseph thinks training still matters. Then the fragments fall, Xiao's ruined monstrous body keeps moving, and that little victory starts looking like a receipt for pain instead of a win. Joseph is wounded, exhausted, and staring at a corpse that refuses to do the polite thing. Now Xiao pushes the fight into its real form, and the horror rising in front of him reveals why Kaijang miscalculated so badly. This is Blood Raven, the monster blade bound to a creature's will, and it is not acting like a mindless demon. Xiao studies it from the stairs and catches the key detail. It lacks demonic madness, which means he is facing something intelligent enough to scheme, not just rage. Blood Raven attacks with layered intent, forcing Xiao to treat every strike like a question with a trap inside it. Xiao deflects and reads the pattern instead of rushing, because if he guesses wrong, this fight stops being a massacre and becomes his first real loss after choosing the monster's path. Then he reveals the answer. Blood Raven fell for his feint, and the hunter has just become the target. Xiao counts the setup with cold focus, grips his weapon, and fires before Blood Raven can correct its mistake. The shot detonates the opening he created, and Blood Raven's shock says more than any speech could. Xiao is not overpowering it by accident. He is learning how monsters think. When the creature's true dragon form shows itself, the fight stops being a cleanup and becomes a public warning about what Xiao is willing to become. Xiao names his own justification before finishing it. Annihilating monsters is righteous, and anything blocking human progress is crime and sin. Blood Raven throws the accusation back, claiming righteousness for itself and calling Xiao the monster, which lands because it is not entirely wrong anymore. Xiao drives through the counterattack anyway, but the final hit catches him with enough force to shock him, proving Blood Raven still has a hidden power even after being exposed. Back in the ruined city fight, Xiao has proved he can think like Blood Raven, but now the cost gets uglier. The power stops looking borrowed and starts looking like something living through him. Blood Raven fully manifests, and the enemy's confidence finally cracks, because this is no longer a man swinging a weapon, it is a man opening the door for a named horror. Blood Raven lands the kind of hidden strike that changes the argument instantly, and Xiao reads the hit for what it is. Not a clean victory, but a sneak attack that proves Blood Raven still has cards left. When the enemy demands to know what kind of monster Xiao is, the insult almost helps Xiao because he has already decided being feared is cheaper than being weak. Xiao stops pretending this power is normal and lets the name Blood Raven stand in the open. The enemy asks if that is his new name now, but Blood Raven gives nothing back, which is somehow worse than a speech. Silence is free and terror handles the paperwork. That reveal turns the massacre from private violence into a public disaster. A trapped victim begs Blood Raven for mercy, but the order to attack comes anyway, and Blood Raven obeys, proving the threat is not only powerful, it can be directed. Blood Raven tears upward through the building and carries the destruction into the rain-soaked city, which means the authorities can no longer treat this as one ugly fight inside one property. The civil conflict has become a containment crisis, and every official outside now has to decide whether they are facing a criminal, a weapon, or a catastrophe with a name. Outside the building in the rain, city defense soldiers lock down the streets and even the plumbing routes, ready to strike the moment Blood Raven breaks loose. Their commander holds them back because a blind assault could make the disaster worse, but an elder officer pushes the colder line. The people inside may be guilty, yet only the federal government gets to judge them. That restraint gets tested immediately when someone escapes the building, and a younger sibling tries to follow. The jump forces the soldiers to stop thinking in clean categories, like suspect and civilian, because people are still spilling out of the disaster one by one. In the rain outside, Yan Chan, a level 2 healer caught in the investigation, meets the city defense army and confirms her identity. She wants to know why they are questioning her, but the soldiers are already connecting survivors, witnesses, and missing reports into one official version of what happened. The questioning turns to Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, and Yan Chan's shock says his name still carries weight. When the investigator says Mask is not only alive but healthy, the case stops being about one building and starts brushing against the old political machine that knows how to bury useful heroes after using them. Elsewhere now, a young man sits alone in custody while an officer reports that he has confessed to attacking Kaizheng Investment, the company that pressured the Yan family for years over their house. The confession gives the authorities a neat label, but only a name is not enough to explain why Xiao keeps appearing around every dangerous thread. The report widens to Yan Xiao, a healer from the secret realm, and her family history makes the file look less ordinary by the second. Her father once refused a government post and later died in the Great Obscenity incident, while Yan Shan is tied into the same family tragedy, so this is no longer a simple assault case. Then the officer drops the detail that matters most. Yan Xiao met Xiao inside a secret realm, and there was no official report for his appearance there. That means the government is not just chasing Blood Raven's rampage now, it is discovering that Xiao has been moving through sealed danger zones before anyone admitted he was involved. Inside the current military review, Captain, the officer leading the questioning, realizes Xiao is not acting like a normal captured fighter at all. He calls him bloodthirsty, but the younger officer catches the stranger parts. Xiao is staring at the cloak with nostalgia, which means this is not his first brush with soldiers like them. That one look turns a prisoner report into a problem with history attached. The questioning turns into a legal trap. Xiao can either die for what the authorities accuse him of, or join the Atonement Battalion and spend his sentence fighting monsters. Xiao pushes back because the punishment sounds almost insulting after everything he has already survived, so the officials start probing whether he has been on the monster front before, and in what role. For Xiao, this matters because the system is offering him the exact battlefield he needs while pretending it is a cage. Director Arthur, an official who once served near the front lines, brings out the Mask medal and ties this whole hearing to Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power after the world decided useful monsters were still monsters. Arthur says he only followed Lord Mask from a distance, but even that is enough to understand the pattern. Heroes bleed for humanity, then paperwork arrives with a knife and a stamp. So when the officials ask if Xiao understands, the real warning is not subtle at all. They reveal the detail that makes Xiao dangerous to the state. He can enter secret realms without the monitoring bureau noticing. If that leaks, every agency loses control of the story. So Xiao's hidden movement is no longer just suspicious, it is politically radioactive. Xiao reacts hard because the secret that helped him move faster than everyone else has just become the leash they want around his neck. Years earlier, the records shift to the Great Obscenity reincarnation, the disaster that proved how fast public gratitude can rot. Great Obscenity, the plant-based natural disaster monster, threatens Dahi City, a city built only 40 years after the catastrophe, and Xiao is transferred to the front line after trial to solve the crisis. He destroys Great Obscenity before it can hurt the city, but the crowd still abuses him, so his victory buys safety for everyone except himself. After that disaster, Xiao survives wave after wave of criticism, and forces himself to rebuild a life the public keeps trying to bury. He even stands in a public trial and apologizes, not because the mob understands him, but because starting over costs him pride before it costs anything else. Then the record lands on the line that defines the whole wound. The hero named Mask is gone, and the person left standing is only Xiao. Back in the official analysis, older authorities study Xiao's history at the monster front and realize he does not fit one professional path. He is developing multiple abilities at once, which makes him valuable, terrifying, and very inconvenient for a federation that likes its weapons labeled. The conclusion is ugly but clear. Even heroes like Mask get trials when they challenge authority, so Xiao's strength does not protect him from politics. A blonde official looks at Xiao's photo and admits the obvious problem. Xiao is young, but he already has the power to kill level 6 professionals. That kind of talent should make him an asset. Yet the Federation cares more about preserving order, so they decide punishment has to be public and severe enough to make citizens feel safe. The verdict sends Xiao to the monster retreat front lines, assigned to the 1st Division of the Atonement Battalion, which is a sentence dressed up as deployment orders. The political machine still has one loose end. Mask himself has vanished, and the officials want to know why nobody has found him. Reports say the propaganda campaign worked and Mask's supporters are shrinking, but the room still treats his absence as a threat because a disgraced hero with no location is the kind of problem no committee can put in a folder. That leaves Xiao marching toward the front while the Federation keeps hunting the last symbol that proves heroes can become enemies overnight. Inside the Federation Council, officials admit they bought enough votes with perks and power to expel Mask, the disgraced hero they already stripped bare. The problem is immediate. Monster appearances jump 32%, so their political win starts looking less like justice and more like setting the house alarm on fire. One councilman finally asks the question nobody wants on record. Did they push Mask too far when keeping him as a special hero might have kept the monsters down? Another official snaps back that this concern is not noble. It is business, because city defense contracts are feeding certain family accounts very nicely. The debate turns ugly because the council is not really arguing about public safety, it is arguing over who profits from fear. With no recent demon manifestations or heavenly disasters, one side wants to shrink the city defense force, which means fewer guards, fewer contracts, and a very expensive argument wearing a suit. Outside that room, the state machinery keeps chewing through ordinary people as officers dismiss 2 civilians from questioning, but warn they may be dragged back as court witnesses. One of them freezes at the word, because being a witness in Mask's case means getting pulled into the same political grinder that just ruined a hero. Sitting outside, the civilian cannot square the official story with what Mask actually did, because punishing corrupt scum does not sound like senseless cruelty from where he sits. That matters for Xiao too. The Federation can call a protector vicious whenever his methods stop being convenient, which is exactly the trap waiting for him. Back at the Yan household, the fallout turns personal instead of political. Yan Xiao, the healer from the secret realm, apologizes for the messy room, but Yan Shan, the level 2 healer, only cares that her sister is standing again, which is the first quiet proof that Xiao's brutal choices are still saving real lives. Back at the military conference, the cost of losing Mask lands all at once. A third of the defense force has been pulled out, morale is collapsing, and half the teams have resigned. The front line is not just weaker now, it is becoming a place soldiers are choosing not to die for, which is a tiny scheduling issue for civilization. Captain, the field leader already close enough to danger to recognize it, senses an aura that should not be alive. An officer confirms the nightmare. Captain has only seen the corpse of Great Obscenity, the plant-based disaster monster, but this is the living thing, and that means the crisis has moved from report to outbreak. The officials try to fold the Kaijang building case into clean paperwork, saying the culprit was captured 3 days ago after a swift encirclement. Then the briefing breaks mid-sentence, because whatever has arrived is important enough to interrupt the people who usually interrupt everyone else. In the city now, Great Obscenity announces itself through impossible roses, beautiful for about one breath, before invisible violence tears through them. The monster is not attacking like an animal hunting food. It is spreading a living disaster into the streets, and pretty flowers are suddenly the worst city decoration available. The growth keeps expanding, dragging vines and blooms across the air until the city no longer feels like human territory. Every new rose is a warning that Great Obscenity is converting the battlefield itself, which means normal soldiers cannot just aim at one body and call it a day. A civilian is caught by the plant monster before anyone can organize a defense, and the vines wrap him into the disaster like the city is being harvested. This is why the earlier resignations matter. When the front line collapses, the monsters do not wait politely at the border. An unnamed defender steps into the falling petals and answers the rampage with a massive counterattack, blasting the monster apart before it can keep rolling through the street. For 1 second, it looks like the disaster has a solution, which is usually when the story starts charging extra. Instead of dying, Great Obscenity breaks into fleshy, smaller forms and reforms into a rose-headed nightmare over the ruins. The wind turns into a worse problem. This creature does not simply survive damage, it adapts around it. As people run through the wreckage, a man arrives and shouts for everyone not to panic, because he is here. That declaration is meant to restore order, but with Great Obscenity still standing, it also marks the next test of whether humanity's defenders can do anything without the heroes they chose to discard. In Daihe City, the crowd mistakes the arriving defender for the answer, and cheers that a professional has come to save them. But Xiao reads the monster differently. He already killed this thing once, so if it is spreading like an infection now, Great Obscenity has not returned as a corpse, it has returned as a problem with homework done. The disaster widens before anyone can package it into one clean target, with demons appearing across the city, and Captain, the frontline commander trying to hold order, realizing this is not Great Obscenity behaving by the old rules. He names the infected forms human flowers, which sounds almost polite until the lesson lands. Spiders evolve, and common sense is now a coupon that expired yesterday. That means the fight stops being a duel and becomes a rescue crisis, because humans are being devoured, while Captain has to prove the defense forces can still protect the city. He commits to overwhelming force, and for a moment, the survivors believe the nightmare is ending, which is exactly the kind of fragile hope this monster keeps stepping on with muddy shoes. Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power after Parliament condemned him, reappears near the disaster and sees the signature of the enemy he was supposed to have erased. Below him, the city turns into a green hell, and the spreading roots prove Captain's attack has not solved the catastrophe at all. It has exposed the scale of it. Captain immediately changes tactics and orders everyone to stop using fire against the defiled infected offspring, because brute force may be feeding the outbreak instead of ending it. When his subordinate asks what is happening, Captain admits the scent matches great obscenity, even though Mask once wiped it out and the officials backed radiation treatment to finish the job. The warning gets worse. A subordinate reminds Captain that trying to solve a 10th level natural disaster monster alone is a very fast way to become a cautionary sentence. But delay costs even more, so Captain shifts from heroics to containment, to warning everyone about radiation infection and demanding monitoring data before the city loses its last readable map. Outside the battlefield now, the disaster becomes national news, as broadcasts announce military mobilization and a parliament resolution to strengthen the defense army. Mask receives the same news, which twists the knife neatly. The system that punished him now needs the kind of response only monsters and discarded heroes understand. Across Dahe City, civilians watch emergency reports confirm a natural disaster-level monster has appeared, while the overgrowth swallows buildings faster than official language can calm anyone down. Online, people drag up older monster incidents and Mask's past response, because when half a city is on the table, everyone suddenly becomes an expert with a comment box and zero evacuation plan. Back in Dahe City, the Great Obscenity reveals what the broadcasts were trying to describe with polite disaster language. He is not attacking one street, he is spreading through the city itself. This plant-based natural disaster has a body, a core, and enough reach to make evacuation feel like arguing with a collapsing building. Captain, the frontline commander sent to stop the catastrophe, takes the lead and enters the monster tide alone, which tells everyone the army has already moved past containment and into desperation. If he cannot break through to the core, Dahe City does not get a defense line, it gets swallowed. Captain tears through the outer defenses so easily that witnesses start treating him like the answer to the crisis. But then he stops. That pause matters, because he has found the real problem. The Great Obscenity is not just a mass of plants. He has a central will hiding inside the ruin. The Great Obscenity speaks with regret, but it is the ugly kind of regret, the kind that means he wishes he had killed Captain earlier. Captain answers by throwing his veteran 7th level power straight at the core, trying to end this before the monster learns any more tricks. For 1 second, the attack looks like proof that Captain still has the strength to carry the city on his back. Then the Great Obscenity simply endures it, and that changes the fight from a rescue operation into a math problem with too many roots. Captain gets forced back, and the Great Obscenity expands again while aircraft pull away, which is the cleanest possible announcement that human firepower is losing range control. The monster is not merely surviving Captain, he is buying space and turning the city into more of himself. Captain understands the real horror now. The Great Obscenity has high speed regeneration, so Captain raises his output and tries a heavier strike, because when cutting the weed fails, the next bright idea is usually to blame the weed and swing harder. The Great Obscenity answers by showing that regeneration is only half the problem. He mocks Captain's power and speed, then moves through the city's plant network faster than Captain can track, which means the commander is not chasing one enemy anymore. He is chasing every growth connected to him. Captain realizes escape may not even be possible, because the Great Obscenity keeps changing location through the plants and cannot be killed while those humanoid flowers remain. That forces the military into its ugliest option: deploy large-scale weapons and annihilate the whole area, saving the city by destroying a piece of it first. In Dahe City, Captain finally asks the question every cornered defender hates: can he still run, or has the Great Obscenity already turned the battlefield into a cage? The answer arrives immediately, as the vines catch him and leave him broken on the ground, which proves this disaster is no longer something one commander can duel into submission. Captain burns everything he has left to force one last ride, and the technique is brutal enough that even his own body starts losing the argument. The blast is not a clean victory move, it is a life force gamble, the kind of emergency button nobody labels with friendly instructions. The control side spells out the cost. This ultimate release overloads blood vessels and cells, and even trained professionals can walk away powerless, paralyzed, or not walk away at all. Captain keeps pushing anyway, and his ruined face says the price is already being collected. Back in the monitoring room, the data refuses to give anyone comfort, because the energy peaks keep climbing instead of dropping after Captain's sacrifice. One observer dismisses the display as not the real Great Obscenity at all, which is a deeply unhelpful sentence when the city is already having a terrible day. The explanation makes the catastrophe worse. This mutated Great Obscenity works like Antaeus, the earth giant from Greek myth, who grows stronger while connected to the ground. In Dahe City, that means the Great Obscenity is feeding off tens of thousands he assimilated. So he is not one enemy hiding in a ruin, he is one body backed by a city's worth of stolen lives. The control room finally names the scale of the nightmare. The energy reaches the highest red secret realm level and keeps rising toward a 9th level natural disaster. That means Dahe City is no longer a battle zone to be defended. It is a city already being written off. On the devastated battlefield, Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of his power, confronts the creature with the question that still matters under all this force. If the Great Obscenity has so much power, why did he let innocent people drown in darkness? Mask demands an answer again and again, and then the city is swallowed by another overwhelming surge as even he admits he cannot hold it back anymore. The Great Obscenity answers without needing mercy. His core gathers itself, his tendrils lash out, and the pressure suddenly drops just enough for the soldiers to think the enemy is retreating. For one precious second, they believe they survived, which is exactly when the ground proves them wrong. The Great Obscenity rises over the ruined city in a larger, fuller form, and the burst that follows makes the earlier retreat look less like escape and more like a setup. His face settles into something almost human, which is worse because this is not a mindless disaster anymore. It is a disaster that can answer back. The Great Obscenity finally responds to Mask's question, turning that moral accusation back on the man burning below him. Mask refuses to fold, hanging in the surge and saying there is nothing new about being alive too, which means Dahe City's defenders are outmatched, but not yet silent. Captain, Dahe City's frontline commander, throws everything he has into the Great Obscenity, and the broadcast instantly sells it as humanity's big comeback. For one glorious second, people believe their commander has broken a natural disaster monster, and a random kid even starts planning a lightning career before anyone checks if the corpse signed off on that announcement. But the Great Obscenity is not defeated. He is evolving right in front of them. He takes Mask's defiance and twists it into a verdict. If being alive is so ordinary, then everyone resisting him can go die with confidence. Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of his power, realizes the monster is not raging blindly anymore. He still lands a brutal counter, but the damage around Dahe City proves the real problem. Even when the defenders hurt the Great Obscenity, they cannot stop the city-level catastrophe from spreading. At the City Defense Force's exclusive prison, the disaster reaches a place that should be locked down tighter than a tax office vault. The containment system fails, the prisoner is gone, and the soldiers inside understand the ugly truth before anyone says it. Dahe City's defense line has been breached from within. Panic takes over the facility because trained soldiers are still human when a natural disaster monster starts rewriting the room. One soldier breaks and runs, others aim their weapons to force order back into place. But discipline does not mean much when the thing in front of them ignores the script. The defense force tries to answer with force, and the Great Obscenity answers by proving their weapons are not the same language. Soldiers are thrown back, appendages tear through the facility, and the city structures become part of the battlefield instead of protection from it. Then the massacre suddenly stalls, and the soldiers realize someone has intervened before the Great Obscenity can finish swallowing Dahe City. This is the turn that matters. The official defense has failed, so the city survives only because a hidden savior steps in from outside the approved chain of command. Inside the command room, Captain's people scramble for an explanation and guess Federation support, because that would make the most political sense. But the attack on the monster is too precise, dismantling its limbs one by one, which means this is not a rescue operation built for publicity. Someone is hunting the disaster like he already knows where it hurts. The soldiers finally understand who saved them. It is Xiao, the condemned protector humanity keeps treating like the monster in the room. Dahe City is alive because the person society fears most is the one willing to do the job no one else can finish. After that intervention, Xiao's mission sharpens into something far bigger than defending one city. The new target is the Sixth Obscenity reincarnation, because the Great Obscenity has returned after previously being destroyed, and rebirth means this disaster is not a one-time emergency anymore. The briefing explains why the Great Obscenity is terrifying. It is a primeval forest life form, not just a big enemy with vines for decoration. If it spreads unchecked, terrain, plants, bodies, and consciousness all get folded into one living system, which sounds peaceful only if you skip the part where nobody gets to remain themselves. So Xiao makes the hard choice that defines his path again. He needs the Great Obscenity's heart to gain power against the Void Beasts, even if that means diving deeper into monster power himself. Saving humanity on his terms now requires harvesting the disaster instead of merely killing it, which is a sentence no normal hero puts on a resume. Back in Dahe City's spreading nightmare, the Great Obscenity reveals the shape of its promise through a body fused with the life it controls. Its tendrils reach across the city, while it offers a beautiful world without sadness, pain, or injustice. But the price is total assimilation. The assimilated voices make the horror plain. They are no longer separate lives, only pieces of one shared consciousness. That is the catastrophe Xiao has to stop. Not just a monster destroying buildings, but a false utopia that saves people by erasing every person inside it. Back in Dahe City's spreading nightmare, Great Obscenity stops pretending this is simple slaughter and sells assimilation as happiness. It claims the victims keep only the joy of being alive, which sounds comforting until the south side starts vanishing in bulk and everyone realizes the city is being converted into one giant family with no exit door. Xiao faces Great Obscenity in its fully manifested form, and the turn hits him hard. He recognizes who this disaster used to be. That matters because killing it is no longer just cleanup, but Xiao still needs its monster core if he wants the power to save humanity his own way. Xiao reaches toward Great Obscenity, but the creature answers with the language it understands best: growth, control, and forced belonging. It arms itself with plant power and tendrils, proving its pure land is not mercy, it is recruitment with teeth. The humans caught near the fight try to survive behind a plant-made barrier, then Great Obscenity gathers its power into blooming weapons and hammers the threat in front of it. For a moment, the disaster has the field advantage, and Dahe City gets a very rude gardening demonstration. But the blast does not settle the battle, because Great Obscenity keeps standing and pushes into a second kill attempt. Its body even starts splitting under the pressure, which proves Xiao is not fighting a single target anymore, but a citywide organism that can break apart and still keep coming. The watching humans begin to panic for a different reason. The thing fighting Great Obscenity uses human-level tactics, so they wonder if a human has disguised himself as a monster. That suspicion cuts straight into Xiao's nightmare, because if the line between humans and monsters becomes this blurry, people will fear the savior almost as much as the disaster. Then the monstrous fighter evolves mid-battle, and the whole fight tilts from defense into predation. Commander-in-Chief, the military leader from Army Camp A1, catches the tactic immediately. The attacker got close to the giant enemy's head, then escaped upward before the counterblow could punish him. Xiao pushes through the aftermath with Blood Raven, the monster blade tied to his darker power, and the citywide effect finally lands. The humanoid flowers that were moving through Dahe City suddenly fall still, which makes the pilots think the disaster might actually be dead. That hope lasts about 3 seconds, which is generous by apocalypse standards. Every flower body starts asking the same question at once, and the repeated "Who are you?" reveals Great Obscenity's mind is still alive across its network. Blood Raven manifests in Xiao's hands, and even Great Obscenity notices the blade with alarm, asking why he holds it. Then the disaster changes its pitch from conquest to partnership, offering unity with other beings and promising enough multiplied power to remake this rotten world. Back in Dahe City, Xiao has forced Great Obscenity to show its prize. And the next stake is simple. If he wants the disaster dead for real, he has to reach its core without letting it turn him into part of the garden. The system names the core of Great Obscenity as the final reward, and the disaster instantly understands the trap, since a prize that big is also bait with very polite packaging. Great Obscenity drifts at the edge of its own barrier, still trying to make Xiao choose surrender over slaughter. Xiao answers by rejecting its dream of a remade world and choosing the uglier option. He will end this filthy system himself, even if the method makes him look worse than the thing he is killing. That choice turns the negotiation into a hunt, so Xiao attacks first and tries to drive Great Obscenity back before its network can fully swallow the battlefield. For a moment, the pressure is his, and the disaster that was offering partnership gets treated more like a locked door with a bad attitude. Great Obscenity answers by wrapping Xiao in its own power, which proves the real danger was never just its body. It wants to absorb him, study him, and make his strength another branch of itself, so every second inside its grip risks giving the disaster exactly what it wanted. Inside that living prison, Xiao goes still long enough for Great Obscenity to think the assimilation is working. Then his eye opens, and the turn lands. He did not get caught by accident. He let the disaster pull him closer to the one place he could never reach from outside. Xiao remembers the previous life, where Great Obscenity killed tens of thousands because nobody found the right killing point. That memory changes this from a desperate brawl into a mission, since he is not trying to overpower the whole disaster anymore. He is searching for the hidden core that kept it alive last time. So Xiao lets the monster logic take over and stops fighting like a clean hero. His body twists into something more brutal, he detonates power from the inside, and Great Obscenity loses the comfort of being the only nightmare in the room. The disaster tries to bury him in its layered defenses, but Xiao keeps pushing deeper instead of escaping. That matters because every barrier he tears through narrows the search, until the plant god's enormous body finally gives up the one thing it has been hiding, the core. Xiao recognizes the destination the moment he reaches it, and that is the first real victory of the fight. He has not simply damaged Great Obscenity, he has found the organ that makes killing it possible, which is a lovely bit of anatomy homework under apocalyptic working conditions. Inside the disaster's inner space, a trapped defender faces the dark will of Great Obscenity and realizes Xiao's invasion has created an impossible opening. Great Obscenity admits it did not expect someone to break through again, but the defender is left with the harder question. Now that the shell is cracked, what should be done with the chance? Inside Great Obscenity's core space, the trapped defender realizes the invader is not masked. The disgraced hero stripped of power and blurts out the worst possible compliments. Xiao somehow looks even more heroic than the man humanity already ruined. That hesitation matters because Great Obscenity is not only fighting bodies now, it is trying to read what kind of person has broken into its heart. Outside in the storm above the city, Great Obscenity drops back toward the civilians below, so the disaster stops being a hidden core hunt and becomes a public extinction problem again. It crashes through the city, rises again, and gets pinned long enough for the Federation to make the coldest call on the board. If the monster cannot be contained, the whole city becomes acceptable collateral. The trapped defender breaks under the realization that his opening may have helped trigger a nuclear response, and his regret lands hard because the Federation solution proves exactly why Xiao stopped trusting human institutions. Even the monsters understand the math. The government is ready to sacrifice the city to erase Great Obscenity, which is a brutal policy memo with a mushroom-shaped signature at the bottom. Great Obscenity answers the nuclear threat by expanding instead of retreating, turning the city itself into part of its body. Its smaller spawn spread through the streets while the main platform rises over everything, which means the target is no longer just in the city, it is becoming the city. The plant disaster starts wrapping buildings and reaching through the urban core, so every second of delay makes the bomb less like a rescue operation and more like a coin toss with civilians underneath it. The Federation wanted one clean strike, but great obscenity forces them into the ugly version, where killing the monster also means feeding the catastrophe more ground to possess. The nuclear weapon finally detonates, and for one horrifying moment, the civilians believe this is the end of the disaster. Then great obscenity survives inside the fire, spreads farther, and emerges changed, proving humanity has not killed the calamity, it has upgraded the problem with military funding. Back inside great obscenity's inner space, the trap defender warns Xiao not to touch the strange spring because assimilation can rewrite anyone who comes into contact with it. Xiao touches it anyway and does not mutate, which reveals the central danger of his monster path. The things that should destroy a human are starting to accept him. That acceptance becomes temptation, because the inner world stops feeling like a prison and starts looking almost peaceful to the defender. Xiao is being offered the comfort of belonging to the monster, and the cost is obvious. If he lets this place cradle him, saving humanity may require giving up the last parts of himself that still feel human. Xiao's answer is not to run from the monster logic, but to sit at the center of it and take control. The power gathers around him and pushes outward through the city, proving he is no longer just invading great obscenity's core, he is learning how to command the same kind of disaster from the inside. Elsewhere, officials watch the ruined skyline on a monitor and begin reframing the catastrophe as an incident with a life cycle they can classify, manage, and blame. Because the bomb failed and the city is still blooming with mutated life, the crisis moves beyond one monster. The frontline now has to prepare for a world where disasters evolve faster than the people writing the reports. Inside Dahe City's disaster zone, Xiao lets the mutated plant power swallow him instead of fighting it, because his whole plan now depends on mastering the thing humanity fears. Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, watches with the others and realizes this is no longer a normal containment crisis, which is a polite way of saying the situation has grown teeth. At Star City Federation headquarters, officials stop asking how to save face privately and start asking how to survive the public version of this disaster. Too many people saw Dahe City mutate, so if they cannot fix the city, they need a story clean enough to hand to the crowd with a straight face. One official offers the simple answer: blame the person who is not in the room to defend himself. When another official objects that Mask has not even arrived at the scene, the objection dies fast, because Truth is clearly not the chairperson of this meeting. So the Federation builds its scapegoat. Mask abandoned them. Mask caused the Dahe City disaster, and every corpse can be tied back to him if the wording is ugly enough. The room goes quiet because everyone understands what just changed. Dahe City is no longer only a monster incident. It is now a political weapon aimed at the one hero they already stripped bare. With the blame assigned, the officials move straight to the next machine, the Morning Sun Plan. Experiment 268 has succeeded, bodies are becoming viable, and for Sao this means the people in power are not just reacting to calamities anymore. They are preparing to manufacture answers with human lives on the table. The meeting widens the map to the vast land frontlines, a monster war zone stretching across 1,000,000 square kilometers. The land itself is accelerating through violent shifts, compressing ancient disaster into the present, which makes Dahe City look less like an exception and more like a preview. Before Mask once led an army there, the vast land had already become a place where humans vanished, and secret realm dragons, even dragons, ruled the field. Its true name is the birthplace of calamity, and that name matters because Xiao's private war is now connected to the source of every disaster humanity is trying to outrun. Later, at the Vastland frontlines, a squad waits at a secret realm portal because the crisis has moved from meeting rooms to the battlefield. Two soldiers bicker over who should speak first, then a figure emerges, and the tension snaps into awkward praise for a supposed genius, which is one way to greet danger without using your brain too hard. At the portal, the frontliner questions the strange looks he is getting, because the squad is hiding bad news behind bad acting. The mission's monster has been resolved, but the real cost lands a second later. Captain, the frontline leader tied to Commander Zhang's command, is told his father sacrificed himself, and the official praise does nothing to soften the loss. Still at the front lines, Captain stands with that news long enough for the squad to understand there is no heroic speech coming. The silence matters more than comfort here, because this unit is being asked to keep moving while personal grief gets folded into military discipline. Captain cuts through the morning with command authority and threatens to send the idle soldiers to an atonement camp if they have spare energy to chatter. They apologize immediately, proving this unit may joke at the edge of a portal, but Captain's word still drops heavier than a boot on tile. When one soldier asks whether the whole team needs to enter the secret realm, Captain takes it as doubt in his judgment. The soldier denies it fast, because questioning Captain in front of the portal is apparently a hobby with a very short life expectancy. The soldiers whisper that Captain's presence feels like a high-level monster, the kind of force only a strong will can survive. That fear reveals the real frontline problem around Sheo too. In this war, the strongest protectors are starting to resemble the threats they fight. Deeper inside the cavern, an armored fighter advances alone, and the isolation says everything about the next stage of the war. A warrior raises a spear in the dark, turning the secret realm from a mission site into a proving ground, where suspicion, grief, and monstrous power are about to collide. Inside the Vastland secret realm, Xiao finds the first warning sign before the real fight even starts. Another team's monsters are already dead, but the wounds all come from one weapon, which means this was not a squad cleaning up trash mobs, it was one solo killer moving ahead of him. That suspicion barely has time to breathe before the killer shows himself, a demon-like creature standing over the bodies with a sword and a grin. Xiao has come here to grow stronger without asking humanity for permission, so backing off now would make the whole monster path plan look very decorative. Xiao engages, and the creature immediately notices the problem. Xiao's level is low, but his battle sense is far too clean for an ordinary entrant. In story terms, Xiao is underpowered on paper, but his regressed experience lets him fight above his stats, which is exactly why the Secret Realm starts treating him like an anomaly. The fight turns ugly when more pressure closes around Xiao, forcing him to stop conserving strength and start answering like the ruthless survivor he really is. He cuts through the attacks, drives his own power into the creature, and proves that his weakness is only a number, not a verdict. The creature lunges for the finish, so Xiao commits everything to one decisive counter. The strike lands, the monster drops, and Xiao is left standing among the bodies, alive but badly spent, which is a rough medical bill for one Secret Realm errand. Before Xiao can recover, Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, finds him and treats him less like a rescued soldier and more like evidence at a crime scene. Mask wants answers about Xiao's team, name, and why he entered alone, because a lone survivor in this world is either exceptional or extremely suspicious. Xiao is too injured to sell any heroic explanation, and his body finally gives out. Mask expected someone respectable behind the impossible result, but what he gets is an exhausted kid in a blue jacket collapsing on cue, truly not the strongest opening statement. Elsewhere inside the Secret Realm, the monsters gather information, which means the danger is spreading beyond Xiao's private trial. Captain, the frontline leader whose pressure already terrified his own soldiers, unleashes his power with a death sentence for everything in front of him. Captain's attack turns the Secret Realm from a hunt into a purge, and that matters because the military is not just rescuing people anymore. They are watching for threats, erasing outbreaks fast, and deciding who counts as human before anyone gets a fair conversation. Outside the Secret Realm now, Captain's unit waits by the portal and starts worrying because he should have returned already. The moment someone says to stop talking, Captain exits carrying Xiao, and the first question from the soldiers is not whether Xiao survived, but whether he is a monster from inside. At the hospital, a medic checks Xiao and confirms the strangest part. His injuries are severe, but his vitals are stable and his recovery is absurdly fast. That healing keeps Xiao alive, but it also deepens the exact suspicion he cannot afford, since normal people do not bounce back from Secret Realm damage like a stubborn weed in concrete. Captain decides the hospital is no longer the safest place for Xiao, and orders the medic to discharge him and bring him back under military watch. Then Commander Zhang arrives in the hallway as official attention shifts to the soldiers lost in the natural disaster, tying Xiao's personal mystery to a wider war that is already burying people. Still inside the hospital, a hooded patient sits with the kind of guilt that keeps a man awake even when his body quits. Mary, the attendant keeping watch, tells him the choice has already been made, so blaming himself now is just him punching his own reflection and calling it strategy. Nearby, Xiao coughs himself back toward consciousness, and Mary shifts focus because this is the patient everyone actually needs answers from. Xiao opens his eyes in shock, not relief, which tells Mary his body waking up may be the least dangerous thing happening in that room. Xiao's panic sharpens into recognition, and Mary responds by using a deliberate touch that feels less like comfort and more like a check for what is hiding under his skin. The important turn is simple. Xiao survives the disaster, but every unnatural sign in him gives the military another reason to treat him as a threat instead of a rescued soldier. At N3 Camp, part of the N-series army camps on the Vastland frontline, Xiao learns he has not been brought somewhere safe so much as somewhere controlled. A soldier lays out the camp rules and the warning underneath them: heal, behave, and do not make the army regret keeping him alive. Around the camp, officials are already turning Mask into a political problem. Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, has disappeared after rejecting Parliament's judgment, and the Federation now calls him irresponsible because losing its favorite scapegoat is very inconvenient paperwork. The same soldier tests Xiao's attitude and decides that if he is ready to fight, then the camp will not baby him. But the soldier leaves to clear another secret realm, which means the frontline pressure is already bigger than one suspicious survivor. Elsewhere in the camp, Captain, the unit leader now responsible for Xiao, gets questioned by his soldiers about why headquarters wanted this injured stranger brought in. Captain admits he does not know the accident details or Xiao's possible link to the Supreme Commander, which is exactly the sort of answer that makes a room more nervous, not less. Then one soldier finally names the problem. The stranger is Xiao. The name rings a bell from television, and suddenly Xiao is not just a wounded recruit anymore, but a public rumor walking around with bandages and a bad reputation. When Xiao steps out, the camp immediately watches him like a lit fuse. Another soldier asks why he is moving so soon and where he thinks he is going, and Xiao answers with the one destination that makes everyone's headache worse: the secret realm. Xiao explains why waiting is not an option. His heart has bonded with great obscenity, the plant-based rebirth monster, and his transformed body now thirsts for life. That turns his recovery into a ticking clock, because sitting in bed may be safer for the camp, but it leaves Xiao's monstrous side hungry. A soldier tries to block him with the team entry rule, since secret realms are not supposed to be solo suicide appointments. But an elder soldier overrides it, arguing that with too many secret realms to clear, even one wounded helper is still useful, which is bleak math with boots on. Then the Supreme Commander arrives, and the whole camp snaps to attention, because this is no longer a small disciplinary argument. He backs the exception himself, saying rules exist to serve living people, which gives Xiao permission to walk toward danger, while also proving the army is desperate enough to gamble on him. At Army Camp A1, the Supreme Commander turns the argument into an order, not a debate. As the camp commander, he splits the frontline push in two. Half the soldiers follow Captain, the unit leader also called Zhang, while the other half escorts Xiao toward the vast land danger zones. The message is simple. Xiao is suspicious, wounded, and useful, which is a very military combination. Out on the route, Captain immediately notices the numbers do not add up when only 2 soldiers catch up to him. Xiao has already rushed for a secret realm after waking from catastrophic injuries, so Captain reads that as either suicidal arrogance or a man hiding something. This is the first crack in the army's trust. They need Xiao's power, but they do not know what he really is. Inside a secret realm on the vast land frontlines, Xiao stops pretending his body is normal and leans into the thing everyone fears. He says this place matters because here, away from civilians and rules, he can lose control and kill without holding back. For a man trying to save humanity by becoming less human, that is not a threat, it is a strategy with teeth. Xiao's monster form is still limited because his body has not recovered from the nuclear bomb injuries, so he can only hold it for 3 minutes. But Xiao decides 3 minutes is enough, which tells the soldier's whole safety manual to take a short walk. The question now is not whether the wolves can stop him, but whether Xiao can finish before his borrowed monstrous strength burns out. Xiao tears through the wolves with controlled brutality, using the monster form exactly like a timed weapon instead of a berserk accident. The fight proves the ugly part of his new path. The more monstrous he becomes, the better he gets at protecting humans from monsters. By the time the last wolves fall and dissolve, the secret realm has no boss left to scare anyone with. When the realm quiets, Xiao remains standing, and the victory gives him more than proof. He absorbs the life force from the dead creatures, which heals his damaged body and extends how long he can maintain the monster form. Every cleared realm is now fuel, so the frontline has accidentally handed him a refill station with claws. Back outside the secret realm, the escorting soldiers wait for Xiao to come out and start worrying that he has exceeded the time limit. Their fear flips fast when Xiao returns alive, and a bald hunter asks the obvious question, did he actually defeat the realm boss? This is where suspicion turns into reluctant dependence, because the wounded problem child just cleared a battlefield that should have taken a team. Xiao answers in the most Xiao way possible. The monsters were so weak, he barely felt like he fought a boss. Then he hands over the boss drops, notes they suit arrows better than knives or swords, and heads for the next secret realm before anyone finishes processing the flex. The hunters calculate that he cleared a 5th rank realm in 17 minutes, even faster than Captain, which is the kind of statistic that makes a camp both grateful and deeply uncomfortable. At the next secret realm entrance, the team discovers the teleportation array has already failed because someone else cleaned the place out first. After 4 or 5 realms in one day, the hunters realize the frontline is being emptied at abnormal speed, whether by Xiao or another force moving ahead of them. One hunter chooses the practical read. If someone is clearing realms before they explode into a bigger disaster, take the win and return, even if nobody likes how strange this day has become. Back at the frontline office, the administrators finally understand why the map looks weird. Xiao has helped clear 17 secret realms in one day. The records confirm the energy signatures are gone, so this is no rumor, it is a logistical miracle wearing a blue jacket. The soldiers struggle to process it because even Captain, the frontline leader everyone measures themselves against, is not supposed to pull off that many clears in a single day. Then an officer points out the real problem for their pride. Xiao was appointed by the Supreme Commander, and he is making the normal chain of talent look painfully slow. Because Xiao is proving useful, the bureaucracy immediately does what bureaucracy does best. It finds him another nightmare and hands him paperwork. Xiao accepts the troublesome secret realm without flinching, and the camp starts relying on the man they still do not fully understand. One officer gets carried away and claims Xiao is stronger than Captain right before Captain shows up behind him. The man backtracks so fast he practically invents reverse marching, but the damage is done. Xiao's speed has turned into a direct challenge to Captain's pride. Captain reveals he visited the same realms that day, which means he knows exactly how absurd Xiao's results are. When Xiao confirms he handled it alone, Captain connects it to the confidence Xiao showed even while bedridden, and Xiao quietly wonders why this man keeps grudges with military-grade storage. Instead of smoothing things over, Xiao volunteers for a 6th-rank secret realm, the kind of assignment that exists to humble strong people. That is the point. The system sent him to the front lines, because the fastest path to monstrous power is not comfort, it is repeated contact with places that should kill him. Elsewhere in the camp, the commander-in-chief, the military leader at Army Camp A1, starts piecing together a different picture of Xiao. The sword, the past incident in Daha City, and the impossible distance all point toward one suspicion. If Xiao really is the escaped criminal they think he is, catching him becomes a career-making prize. The next day at the Fork River secret realm, the unit moves toward the entrance because Xiao's abnormal clearing speed has turned into an official test. His teammates ask to follow Captain for once, but the order around the fight stays strict. This dangerous realm is not a group showcase, it is a measuring stick. At the entrance, the team notices the Supreme Commander still has not arrived, which leaves the strongest promised backup missing at the worst possible time. Xiao chooses to go in first anyway, because waiting keeps everyone safe on paper, while the secret realm keeps growing into a real disaster. Inside the dungeon, the danger becomes practical, instead of political. Enclosed terrain, unknown creatures, and no easy room to retreat. The operator confirms the air is safe, but the soldiers understand the worst issue immediately. If strong monsters attack in groups down here, Xiao's team loses space before they even lose blood. Inside the secret realm, the dungeon stops being a cautious scouting trip and starts dumping monsters from above in batches. Xiao's unit forms up, but the swarm hits so hard that the soldiers finally ask the question nobody wants on the receipt. If this is 6th rank difficulty, why does it feel like the realm ordered extra jaws? Then the crocodiles appear, and the problem shifts from crowd control to survival against creatures that should not even belong here. Captain, the unit leader holding the line while the supreme commander is absent, answers the panic with one decisive choice. He burns a huge attack before the team gets buried. The crocodiles are packed together in the tight terrain, so his strike turns their own formation into a trap, and the first wave disappears before it can grind the soldiers down. For a moment, Captain looks untouchable, and the watching soldiers treat the wipeout like proof that the mission might be under control after all. But Captain immediately cuts down the hype, explaining that the attack worked because the monsters clustered in the right place, not because he can casually erase every threat in the realm. That matters, because this dungeon is testing judgment as much as strength, and applause is a terrible shield. As the team moves deeper, Xiao points out the competition itself barely makes sense if nobody knows whether kills, bosses, or survival are the real measure. 10 quiet minutes pass with no second wave, which should be good news, but instead it makes the missing teams feel worse. 2 squads vanished inside the secret realm with no bodies and no gear left behind. The soldiers try to explain it away as crocodiles and Captain's attack, reducing evidence to dust, but that answer is too neat for a place already breaking its own rules. Then Xiao catches something the others miss and asks if anyone heard it, which immediately tells the room that the real danger is not done announcing itself. A new creature tears into the path, and its arrival breaks the unit's confidence faster than the ceiling breaks under it. The soldiers panic because this is no longer a normal wave to clear. It is a boss-level threat that makes entering the secret realm look less like bravery and more like signing paperwork with teeth. One soldier recognizes the deeper problem. This creature carries an aura of fear, so the fight attacks their minds before their weapons even matter. When the monster's power makes ordinary blades feel useless, Xiao still steps forward with a curved blade, choosing to meet the pressure instead of letting the unit collapse. The exchange proves the next stage of the realm's test. Brute force cleared the swarm, but this boss wants to see who can keep moving when fear itself becomes the weapon. Inside the secret realm now, Xiao has proven he can stand through fear, but the trial immediately raises the price. If this unit misreads even one hidden threat, the realm will start feeding on soldiers instead of testing them. Xiao counterattacks first, but the monster answers from below and turns the floor into a trap, which is rude behavior from something already living underground. The ambush knocks the momentum out of the soldiers, so Xiao has to solve the fight before panic spreads through the unit. He catches the underground monster's real position and kills it cleanly, proving his advantage is not just strength, but the ugly survival instinct that keeps noticing danger before everyone else does. The soldiers recover just enough to realize how close they came to becoming lunch with boots on. They praise Xiao for killing the underground threat, but their relief quickly turns into suspicion, because sensing a buried monster during that chaos is not something a normal teammate should casually do. The unit tries to comfort itself by calling the fight a huge victory. 2 level 6 monsters dropped in 1 hit each, which should be enough to make any regular team start planning a victory speech. But that confidence dies when someone points out the worst possible detail. Those creatures were not the real bosses. The secret realm has rules, and the rules have not paid out. No treasure chest appears, no teleportation array opens, which means the realm is still locked, and the true threat is waiting deeper inside. Because the team now knows the earlier monsters were only warm-ups, Captain, the unit leader trying to keep his people alive, orders everyone to stay together and stop wandering alone. The soldiers accept it, but the mood changes. This is no longer a hunt for rewards. It is a controlled retreat through a place that keeps refusing to be finished. Deeper in the cavern, the team reaches a sealed door, the kind of obstacle that says the boss is close without needing a welcome mat. Captain reads the risk correctly. Opening it may trigger something worse, so he chooses a smaller assault team, sending only himself and Xiao inside while the others wait as backup. The door opens and punishes that choice immediately, forcing Xiao and Captain to hold their ground before they can even see what they have challenged. The boss attacks first, and the 2 fighters survive the opening, only because they brace together instead of rushing in like heroes chasing a medal. Inside the boss chamber, Captain studies the enemy instead of panicking, noticing the light footsteps and realizing the threat is not simply a giant brute. Then the real boss reveals itself as a reptilian humanoid built for speed and violence, which means Xiao and Captain are not facing size, they are facing precision with teeth. Inside the boss chamber, the reptilian boss attacks first because it wants to end the intruders before they understand its rhythm. Captain, the unit leader fighting beside Xiao, reads the pressure behind that charge and warns Xiao that this thing has been storing a terrifying amount of power. So hesitation here is basically volunteering to become floor decoration. Xiao answers the boss by refusing to treat it like an untouchable wall. He drives in with a spear attack fast enough that Captain can already see the gamble. If the boss tries to meet that weapon head on, its armor has to survive more than a simple stab. The gamble pays off because Xiao is not only piercing the boss, he is using the weapon to trap and punish it. The tethered strike turns the monster's own confidence into a cage, and Xiao strains through the recoil until the boss's defense finally breaks in one violent burst. When the blast clears, the boss hangs defeated, and Xiao stands in control of the room he was supposed to be too weak to survive. Captain immediately understands the cost of that win. Xiao's method works, but it is brutally risky. The sort of move you do when safety has already been kicked out of the planning meeting. Elsewhere in the secret realm, Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, realizes this place is not just throwing stronger beasts at them. He expected to argue with the others about caution, but instead the evidence backs him up. A transformed figure may be Christian, a level 6 professional from N1 army camp whose team vanished first, which means the realm is swallowing trained fighters and returning something worse. Still elsewhere in the secret realm, Mask and Xiao face a group of mutated creatures, and the problem becomes clear. This is no longer a clean monster hunt. It is a missing soldier disaster with teeth. They split the field, Xiao taking the left side while Mask handles the right, because if they let the creatures mass together, the whole rescue turns into crowd control with claws. Mask proves he may be stripped of status, but not of battle sense, cutting into his side before the creatures can overwhelm him. His attack tears through multiple enemies at once, but buying space for the team and showing that even disgraced heroes can still make a room very uncomfortable for monsters. Then Christian's monstrous form steps back into Mask's path, and the fight stops being about clearing lesser creatures. Christian attacks with raw transformed power, but Mask survives the exchange and leaves the creature bloodied on the ground, turning the mystery from a threat into proof that something inside this realm is corrupting high-level professionals. Xiao hears the usual frontline logic. Mindless monsters are only harmless until something gives them a purpose. So he tests the theory the practical way, takes the punishment head-on, and cuts through the group until the creatures drop, proving the real danger is not claws, it is whoever is organizing them. Nice little workplace safety lesson, delivered with teeth. Xiao reports that these were not random victims stumbling around, but trained professionals who came prepared and still ended up twisted. That makes the white-haired soldier's doubt matter, because if prepared fighters fell this hard, the secret realm is not just dangerous, it is designed to corrupt people who should know better. Deeper inside the secret realm, the answer starts looking less like an accident and more like worship. Two multi-headed crocodile-like bosses stand before a towering pillar, and the pressure coming from it makes breathing feel like a paid subscription someone forgot to cancel. The soldiers realize the ritual has to stop now, because continued worship means something far worse than a boss monster may force its way into the realm. They try to break the ritual by taking down the worshipping creatures, and for one moment, it looks like the unit has caught the problem before it matures. But the pillar opens its eyes anyway, focuses with deliberate awareness, and crushes a soldier under its power, which proves this is no ordinary secret realm hazard. The boss fight has turned into first contact with something that can notice them back. The survivors scramble to understand whether the entity was summoned toward all of them, but one soldier catches the truth. Those eyes were fixed on him alone. Then an unseen voice calls them old acquaintances, turning the encounter from random terror into a personal connection that someone in this realm already recognizes. Back with the surviving unit after the boss fight, Xiao and Captain, Zhang's unit leader trying to keep his team alive, become the names everyone whispers about, because they already dealt with a secret realm boss. That should be the part where everyone returns to camp and files a report, but the chain of command has other plans. Out in the field, the Supreme Commander, the high-ranking authority tied to Mask's fall, arrives in person and cuts off any normal return to camp. The soldiers recognize him immediately, which means this is no longer a battlefield cleanup, it is an official intervention with armed weight behind it. The Supreme Commander steps straight past the crowd and puts the pressure on Xiao with one curt question. Then he dismisses everyone else, including Mask, because this situation is not about the unit anymore. It is about Xiao specifically, and the secret realm's monster god Shadow has just followed him into military politics. Out in the field, the Supreme Commander turns a routine debrief into a public accusation by naming Xiao as the perpetrator of the Dahe City massacre. Dahe City being the disaster-born city where Xiao had been trying to survive under a stolen future. The armed team tightens up instantly because one sentence has changed Xiao from useful witness into wanted criminal. That name hits the soldiers late, then all at once. One of them remembers seeing Xiao on television, compares the face in front of him to the wanted reports, and realizes the quiet guy they have been calling Big Brother Xiao is supposed to be the monster on the human side of the war. The accusation finally corners Xiao in the open, so he stops dodging the truth and claims his name himself. It is a small answer, but it hands everyone exactly what they came for, and one soldier practically celebrates the match like he just won a very depressing quiz show. Xiao stands apart from the team now, not as a comrade but as a legal problem with boots. The Supreme Commander lays out the Federation rule clearly. Fugitives are supposed to be captured and sent to atonement camp, but that only makes the next pause more dangerous because he is not acting like a man ready to arrest Xiao. Instead, the Supreme Commander admits he has investigated Xiao and understands why Xiao chose the brutal route. That matters because the highest authority on this field is not excusing the lawbreaker. He is recognizing a method, and even says this age only improves if more people can make choices like Xiao. So the Supreme Commander buries the incident on the spot. Nobody is allowed to bring today up after returning to Army Camp N3. Anyone who disobeys gets expelled, which is a neat little reminder that in the army, silence can come with paperwork and a kick out the gate. Mask, the disgraced hero who already knows what it feels like to be judged by the system, asks permission to speak because the secret realm still does not make sense. He is curious about the altar and the worship he saw around Xiao, but he also knows better than to stroll up to that mystery without asking first. The Supreme Commander answers with the phrase that reclassifies the whole threat: a monster god. He explains that humanity has been fighting symptoms while the source remains, like blocking a river only at the mouth while the spring keeps flooding everything upstream. Mask pushes the obvious question: if there is a source, why has humanity not destroyed it already? The answer is worse than ignorance, because the source behind Secret Realms is the monster god, or the owner of that altar. And although humanity has killed several of them, only one specific person can kill a monster god. That revelation forces the Supreme Commander to change priorities immediately. He orders the Secret Realm cleanouts halted and written notes delivered personally to the army camps, then tells Mask to treat the trip as rest, because living like a machine is how soldiers stop coming back. Then the real assignment lands. Xiao has to go with them on the letter delivery mission. Since his face is now recognized, the Supreme Commander orders him to cover his features for safe travel, turning a wanted man into a covert courier before anyone has time to object. The war shifts from cleaning secret realms to racing messages across a front line that monsters are learning to hunt. Xiao, the wanted protector now traveling with his face covered, rides an armored train toward Army Camp M2 because the warning about monster gods is too dangerous to trust to ordinary channels. Inside the train, the soldiers expect a routine courier run, but one scarred soldier starts questioning the whole setup. If radio exists, why risk people carrying letters through monster territory? The answer is ugly and practical, since monsters can't tap human couriers the way they might exploit transmissions, which means flesh and nerves are still the army's safest encryption. Very advanced system, one armored train, several terrified men, and zero refund policy. That little logic puzzle becomes a warning sign the moment the soldiers react to something outside. If this route is supposed to be safer than radio, then the monsters showing up here means the enemy is no longer just charging at wall. It is predicting human logistics. The convoy gets thrown into an aerial ambush, but before it can reach M2, a massive winged creature attacks from above, and the train's heavy armor suddenly stops feeling like protection and starts feeling like a lunchbox with tracks. The soldiers on the ground understand the problem instantly. They are built to survive land monsters, not a predator that can strike the convoy where its guns and formations are weakest. The creature damages the vehicle and forces everyone into survival mode, which means the letter mission is already bleeding time before the camp even sees them. Reinforcements try to turn the ambush around, and for 1 second the trapped soldiers believe help has arrived. The counterfire buys them space, but the blast also wrecks nearby cover and sends men sprinting through open ground, proving the rescue is not control, it is panic with better equipment. Orders start flying from higher ground, but hesitation spreads faster than discipline. Wolves rush the exposed soldiers, and the attack reveals the real nightmare of this front line. The wolves are using pressure, timing, and fear like a trained unit, not a mindless swarm. Because the ambush fails to stop the mission completely, the surviving soldiers choose speed over caution and push for Army Camp M2 as fast as possible. At this point, arriving with a warning matters more than arriving clean, safe, or with the train still looking expensive. At Army Camp M2, the story shifts from one attacked convoy to an entire front line coming apart. Scouts at the perimeter report that only 3 teams returned today after 30 went out over 2 days, so the camp commander has to face the same conclusion. The monsters are not merely killing patrols, they are erasing the army's ability to see the battlefield. Then the camp spots the incoming armored train and grabs at it like good news. The flag bearer signals it to slow for inspection, but the relief curdles immediately because the train does not arrive like a messenger. It arrives like a weapon that someone else has already used. The train detonates into the camp's approach, throwing bodies, metal, and the whole inspection plan into the dirt. The message does reach M2 in the worst possible packaging imaginable: a destroyed armored train and a battlefield-sized question mark. Some soldiers crawl out alive, which should be a victory, but the wreckage still has a gun emplacement smoking from the fight. That means the convoy did not simply crash. It fought all the way in, and whatever chased it may still be here. The answer rises out of the devastation as a massive dark creature emerges over the survivors. M2 now understands what Xiao's mission has been warning about. The enemy can sabotage routes, break camps, and follow humanity's messengers straight to the next target. At Army Camp M2, the attack turns from a disaster into a strategy. The giant creature pins soldiers in place while the facility starts collapsing around them. Then the second layer arrives, an insect swarm, which means the monsters are not just breaking the gate, they are flooding every escape route at once. A soldier panics when he realizes he came into this nightmare underarmed, which is a rough time to discover your packing list had one job. The troops who do have guns fire back and kill some insects, but the swarm keeps spreading into the burning city, proving bullets can slow this wave without stopping it. The swarm's real threat reveals itself when a humanoid insect form emerges among the chaos, turning the attack from animal panic into organized invasion. Captain, the field leader trying to read the collapse before it kills his men, is forced to admit the worst possibility. A sea of monsters can overwhelm even 9th rank professionals, so ordinary soldiers are walking into a grinder with uniforms on. Inside the camp, the soldiers push forward while the emergency broadcast falls apart in real time. M2 begs for aid, reports the commander dead, then delivers the line nobody wants to hear: Army Camp M2 has fallen, and the silence after that says more than any speech could. The survivors absorb what that means. M2 is not a checkpoint anymore, it is enemy territory. Still, one soldier orders the unit to keep moving toward it, because turning away now means leaving the whole front blind, while the Monster Sea chooses the next camp. As morale cracks, the soldiers blame Star City's leaders and say the front lines were peaceful when Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, still stood there. Xiao hears the ugliest part of his own legend return through their mouths. The monsters seem to know Mask is gone, and the army is starting to miss the monster they condemned. One soldier tries to break the tension with a joke. Then the joke gets dangerously accurate when the others notice Xiao's mask, build, and silhouette resemble Mask. What starts as barracks humor suddenly puts Xiao's hidden identity on the table, and nobody brought a shovel to bury that question fast enough. Xiao chooses not to dodge anymore. He tells them plainly, "I am Mask," and the squad goes silent because the villain they blamed, the hero they needed, and the masked fighter beside them have just become the same person. The squad does not treat Xiao's confession like a neat military report, because one bald soldier admits his 3 little brothers worship Mask. Another soldier pushes the point harder. If Xiao is going to wear that name, he had better survive well enough to deserve it. That turns the secret from a joke into a test, and Xiao now has allies watching him with expectation instead of simple fear. At the battlefront, the argument gets interrupted by a detonation big enough to make identity drama feel badly scheduled. Winged insect monsters flood the area, and the soldiers realize this may be the same bug colony that wiped out Army Camp M2. The question is no longer whether Xiao sounds like Mask, but whether anyone here can stop a camp-killing swarm before it eats another unit. Near the overrun vehicles and forward structures, trapped soldiers scream for help while the formation braces itself against the approaching insects. The bugs do not attack like random beasts, they feel the ground, the air, and the buildings, turning the battlefield into a box with teeth. This is what scares trained soldiers most. The monsters are not just stronger, they are learning how to surround people. The soldiers open fire and knock several insects out of the swarm, but that only proves regular weapons can slow the colony, not break it. Xiao steps in and releases enough force to rip through the mass attack, choosing results over restraint again. For the squad, this is the first real answer to their challenge. The man claiming Mask's name can do what ordinary fighters cannot. Xiao's attack keeps spreading through the swarm until the insects lose their formation and drop out of the sky. By the time the charge fades, the battlefield is carpeted with dead bugs, which is useful and deeply unpleasant for anyone who planned to keep their boots clean. The immediate crisis ends because Xiao turns the colony's numbers against it and wipes out the pressure in one terrifying move. After the swarm breaks, the surviving soldiers regroup and the chain of command snaps back into place. A white-haired soldier thanks the rescue team, but the questions immediately turn toward Army Camp M2 because winning this fight means nothing if the neighboring camp has already collapsed. The rescue has bought them information, not safety. The report lands like a second disaster. Army Camp M2 has fallen. Everyone there is dead. Monsters overran it, and the commander was killed. The killer is described as a small humanoid pest, no taller than 2 meters, with the details still unclear. That vagueness matters, because an unknown commander killer is exactly the sort of threat that turns a battlefield into a guessing game with corpses for hints. The news pushes one soldier toward a reckless move, and Captain, the leader trying to keep this unit alive, instantly shuts it down as suicide. He grips his staff and hesitates. Because command is cruel here, every rescue instinct has to be measured against losing the people still standing. Then an incoming attack forces the choice out of theory and back into survival. Captain stands with his soldiers as they ask what has changed, and he identifies the new danger: convicts from the atonement camp. These are not confused refugees or panicked deserters. Captain says they murdered professionals who were escorting fleeing civilians. So the battlefield has split in the worst possible way, with monsters ahead and human predators loose behind the line. Captain explains that this was always a risk once those convicts were taken out of other custody, and he zeroes in on one of them by the wound on his ear. He accuses the convict of getting that scar when the civilians he killed tried to defend themselves, which turns the standoff personal fast. No trial, no paperwork, just a staff, a scar, and Captain deciding this man does not get to walk away. Captain attacks first because hesitation would only give the convicts room to hurt more people. They dodge the opening shot and meet him head on, but his follow-up blast knocks them back and proves he is not bluffing. The camp may be collapsing, yet Captain still draws a hard line. Monsters are not the only thing humanity has to survive today. Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, is now standing over bound civilians, because survival has turned him into exactly the sort of threat people already fear. He says they need hostages to live, which tells everyone the camp is no longer a battlefield with rules, it is a panic room with weapons. That choice immediately costs him control, because trained fighters hit back hard enough to send a soldier crashing down. The soldier realizes these are not ordinary camp survivors, since he does not remember army camp forces having 3 professionals this sharp, and that means the attackers are no longer the only danger in the room. Captain, the frontline leader trying to keep civilians alive while the camps collapse, makes the call to abandon the Army Camp M2 mission, because charging into a civilian-heavy disaster would turn rescue into a meat grinder. Then even the vehicle gives out from non-stop high-speed travel, because the machine also files a complaint in smoke and heat. An unnamed mechanic steps in and repairs the engine fast, proving the convoy still has useful people, even while the command structure falls apart. Captain asks his name, because in a collapsing army, competence suddenly matters more than rank badges and formal introductions. With M2 abandoned, the group reroutes toward a target between army camps L4 and Y5, trying to save the mission without driving straight into the worst fire. The meaning is simple. Captain is not retreating from duty, he is choosing the route that gives civilians civilians the best chance to survive. At the ruined army camp M2, the reason for Captain's caution becomes horrifyingly clear. A monster god insect force has already taken the camp apart. These creatures are not just rampaging, they are organized enough to stand amid the wreckage like the victory belongs to them. One insectoid monster studies torn papers and mutters about the moon and the sun, which makes the attack feel less like hunger and more like a plan. When an enemy starts reading documents after destroying a camp, nobody gets to call it a dumb beast anymore. The monster's body reveals a living, hive-like structure, and its broken words circle back to humanity itself. That matters because this force is not merely killing soldiers, it is studying the species it wants to erase. Then the insectoid monster god force escalates from occupation to extermination, unleashing power into the ruins and calling a swarm into the sky. M2 is no longer a camp in trouble. It is proof that the monsters can coordinate, overwhelm, and erase a military position before help even arrives. Back with Captain's convoy, the guide reassures everyone that their path is safe and that professional planning will keep them away from monsters. The timing is brutal, because while he is selling calm, the smoke outside keeps growing like the world is quietly correcting his sentence. Outside the convoy now, the soldiers realize the rising shape in the distance is not smoke at all. A swarm of flying spiders darkens the desert sky, and at its center comes a winged humanoid spider, which turns their safe route into the next battlefield. Inside the vehicle, a soldier reports the sighting to Captain, and Captain immediately understands the scale of the disaster. This is the same kind of humanoid monster that killed the commander of Army Camp M2. If he cannot get everyone out now, the convoy will not be rescued by the army. It will become another missing army report. Captain's sensors fill with the swarm, and then with multiple soldier faces, forcing him to face the human cost behind every tactical decision. The camps are collapsing, morale is cracking, and the truth leaking through the ranks is ugly. The monsters are smarter than expected, and humanity may need someone as feared as Shao to survive them. On the collapsing frontline, the insectoid monster god force stops treating this as a battle, and turns it into a declaration of extinction. Humanity is now its target, not its opponent. It locks onto the survivors, gathers its strength, and makes the message simple enough for even military radio to understand. Everyone here is on the menu, and it brought its own fork. The monster attacks the military position, and the defensive line folds before anyone can pretend this is still controllable. The building comes apart, dust swallows the area, and Shao gets thrown into the disaster with the rest of the soldiers, which means the convoy's worst-case report has officially become his immediate problem. Inside the wreckage zone, Shao chooses rescue before revenge, and lunges after a blonde youth who is about to be swallowed by the collapse. The kid survives in his arms, confused and terrified, while Shao carries him toward a white-haired soldier on the barren ground, buying civilians and troops a few more seconds, in a place where seconds are suddenly luxury goods. Above the cliffside battlefield, two armored fighters enter the fight and try to meet the descending threat before it reaches the survivors below. Their strike knocks one spiked creature away, but the shocked reaction from the blonde youth says the same thing the whole battlefield is learning. Even trained fighters are barely slowing this swarm down. Inside the armored train now, the commander-in-chief, the military leader at Army Camp A1, cuts through the panic with brutal priorities. He orders everyone to defend the train, sends the engineer to repair and inspect it for breakout, and makes the ugly calculation out loud. If the train dies, the front line dies with it. The commander-in-chief then says the part soldiers are not supposed to say politely. Civilian lives come second when the strong are the only ones who can keep humanity alive tomorrow. It is cold, it is ruthless, and it is exactly the kind of logic that once made people call Shao a monster. Back outside at the swarm, Shao accepts that same terrible logic, but turns it inward, instead of spending other people first. He admits he has to become a monster, unleashes Bloodraven's power, and starts tearing through the insects fast enough that the attack finally stops being a massacre and becomes a test of what he is willing to lose. Shao keeps pushing deeper into the swarm, not fighting like a soldier holding a line, but like a weapon trying to erase the problem before it reaches anyone else. His power carves open the battlefield, and the cost is clear. Every time he survives by becoming less human, he also proves the world was right to fear him. Near the train, the soldiers can only stare and argue with what their own eyes tell them, asking how Shao can be only 6th rank when even a 7th rank commander should not be able to do this so easily. The commander-in-chief shuts down the chatter because escaped monsters are still loose, and as explosions ignite around the train, admiration has no time to become comfort. The train fight turns uglier when a massive insectoid force bursts up from underneath it, which means the loose monsters were never the real disaster. The soldiers recognize the creature that ripped open their commanders, so this is no random beast, it is the battlefield coming back with a receipt. An unnamed white-haired fighter steps in to buy time, but the insectoid commander immediately proves why the soldiers are terrified of it. The fighter survives the first exchange by staying mobile, yet the monster keeps forcing him to react instead of letting him choose the fight. The fighter realizes the insectoid is using after images, and that changes the problem from strength to perception. If he guesses wrong once, the creature does not need a second invitation to turn him into battlefield confetti. Then the insectoid commander escalates, and the ground itself seems to answer with monstrous roots and violent power. Captain, the frontline leader who has been trying to keep this chaos organized, cries out because the fight has stopped being containable. Shao crashes back into the fight from the towering creature, and his choice is brutally simple. Either overpower this thing now, or let the train survivors get swallowed by a monster god battlefield. The creature hammers down, but Xiao plants himself in the attack and starts forcing its own power back against it. That decision costs Xiao another piece of ordinary humanity, because he does not win by fighting clean, he wins by feeding the monster path inside him. Blood Raven, his adopted monster blade, answers the god blood in the air and begins a second evolution, turning the enemy's divine contamination into Xiao's next weapon. Handy little upgrade system if you ignore the part where the currency is nightmare blood. In the ruined battlefield, the white-haired fighter recognizes Xiao and questions what he is doing, because Xiao's plan sounds less like rescue and more like controlled disaster. Xiao stays armed and gives the only tactic he trusts now. Kill the monsters first, then deal with everyone doubting him after. At the forest perimeter, a watching ally warns Xiao not to die, which is about as tender as this war currently gets. The warning matters because Xiao is walking deeper into a fight where victory makes him stronger, but also makes him harder for humans to accept. Inside the forest clearing, the insectoid monster god force gathers again, no longer just attacking soldiers, but studying the humans who refuse to break. When it confronts Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, the creature calls him human with curiosity, and that single word lands like an insult from something deciding whether humanity is prey or potential. The insectoid monster god Force tries to sort out the scent in front of it, asking why a human smells like one of its own. Xiao answers by refusing the whole question. He is not here to prove he is human anymore, and if the world needs a monster to survive, he is willing to wear the name first. That choice finally lets Xiao stop holding back, and Blood Raven, his monster blade, understands exactly what that means. The enemy wants the first strike, but Xiao reads that intention before it moves, which turns the fight from a surprise attack into a test of who can adapt faster. Blood Raven rushes in and forces the monster god power to answer with raw strength, smashing Xiao back hard enough to make the battlefield disappear under the impact. For a moment, the enemy looks dominant, but Xiao rises through it, and that is the problem. Hurting him is not the same as stopping him. Xiao drags the fight into close range, trying to bind the creature down instead of trading clean blows. When he mocks its power, the monster god force immediately proves it still has enough force to throw him off. So this is not a clean stomp yet, just a very violent negotiation with zero paperwork. Then the turn arrives. The creature decides Xiao has had his chance, and it takes control of the rhythm. Its counterattack drives the point home that Xiao can claim the monster's path. But monster gods still sit higher on that food chain unless he steals something greater from them. The source of that greater power finally names itself through the battlefield. Treacherous Wisdom, a demon god whose blood is exactly the kind of forbidden fuel Blood Raven was born to consume. Blood Raven absorbs that god blood and begins its second evolution, which means Xiao's weapon is not just surviving the fight, it is feeding on the enemy's divinity. Blood Raven awakens a new presence inside its power and gains Crowtide, a fresh ability born from Treacherous Wisdom's blood. Xiao recognizes the upgrade at once and tells Blood Raven it has grown stronger again, which is good news in the same way finding teeth in your sword is good news. Useful, terrifying, and hard to explain to normal people. After the battle on the armored train, the team gets the first breath of relief. The insect swarm has been cleared from the sky, and the report goes straight to Captain, the frontline leader, trying to keep everyone alive. But relief curdles fast when the soldiers realize Xiao was left at the center of that disaster, and nobody wants to say out loud what his silence might mean. On the armored train, the soldiers finally get the news they were afraid to hope for. Xiao is back. When they ask whether he really handled the monster that killed the 7th rank commander of Army Camp M2, Xiao gives the smallest possible yes, which is very on brand for a man treating a battlefield miracle like a weather update. That answer changes the room, because if Xiao can kill something that strong, his rank is no longer the question, his limits are. Mask thanks Xiao for saving his life, but Xiao barely understands why anyone would make a big ceremony out of survival. Mask sees the real problem underneath that awkward little exchange. Xiao's power is growing at a pace that makes normal ranking systems look decorative. The team has relief now, but it comes with a fresh fear, because their strongest weapon is becoming harder for even allies to measure. That relief breaks when a soldier reports to Captain that the radio cannot reach the nearest camp. Mask pushes the issue, and Captain confirms the equipment is not broken. Something is blocking every signal in and out. In plain terms, the armored train has become an island, and in a monster war, isolation is usually the appetizer. Inside Xiao's monster path system, the next main task appears. A sea of monsters must be exterminated. The silent glimpse of something watching turns the blackout into a warning, because this is not random interference. It is the opening move of a larger hunt. Back in the train's command area, the radio suddenly catches a transmission from Army Camp L4, and the crew moves fast to answer. They identify themselves as the team from Army Camp N3, traveling by armored train, and L4 responds with instructions that sound almost too clean after a day of dead signals. For a moment, the path looks simple again. Reach L4, hand over, survive. Mask reports that Army Camp L4 is less than 3 hours away, and the armored train still has enough fuel to make it. The civilians latch onto that number like a life raft, already dreaming about hot baths and real rest. Which is fair, honestly, after surviving insects in the sky, even soap starts sounding heroic. The train finally has a destination, and that hope makes the next warning hit harder. Then another transmission cuts through the static and tells them not to trust the messages from Army Camp L4. The team realizes the danger is not behind them but waiting ahead, and the thought clicks into place. Crocodile monsters and humanoid insect monsters have already shown signs of imitating humans. This means the enemy is not only strong, it can lie in a human voice. In the command area, the crew challenges the mysterious warning and demands to know why L4's signal should be treated as a monster trick. At the same time, L4 keeps calling the armored train, claiming the camp has arranged a handover and urging them to approach. So now both choices sound reasonable and both smell wrong. The soldiers split between trusting a temporary camp or trusting Army Camp L4, and finally they turn to Xiao because he is the one person here who keeps surviving impossible setups. Xiao gives them the answer nobody wants: do not go to either place. He says both are traps, and the truth behind it is worse than bad navigation, because under God-chosen leadership, monsters are using disguise, deception, and enslavement to turn human safety routes into feeding lanes. The burning landscape and towering monster presence make the message brutally clear. The war has moved past brute force, and humanity's shelters can now become cages. With both supposed safe routes exposed, Xiao has gained one brutal advantage. He sees the trap before the others walk into it. But changing history has a price, because without Xiao controlling the demon god's treacherous wisdom, a demon god tied to Blood Raven's power is free to help monsters organize on a larger scale. And even Xiao cannot tell whether this new timeline is salvation or a worse road with cleaner shoes. Because the armored train only has 4 hours of fuel left, the soldiers head for the temporary campsite, hoping for the smallest bad option. Camp L4 survivors come out to welcome them, but Xiao reads the truth first. They have become servants of the monsters, so he cuts them down before their greeting can turn into a massacre. The team wanted shelter, and instead they get the new rule of this war: familiar faces can now be bait. Xiao explains why the trap worked. Camp L4 lost communications at the same time as their own group, which means the monsters are not wandering beasts anymore. A portion of them has gained intelligence, strategy, and disguise, so choosing the wrong camp is no longer a travel mistake, it is volunteering for the dinner schedule. Even worse, the creature behind this is slippery enough that Xiao has seen it avoid showing its real body before. For one tiny breath, the tension drops when a soldier asks about Xiao's knife, and Xiao says it is called Flying Raven, a gift from a friend. That small personal detail matters because Xiao keeps acting like a weapon, but he still carries proof that someone once mattered to him. Then the world rudely kicks the door open again, with an explosion swallowing a survivor and child before anyone can pretend this is a normal stopover. Outside the temporary campsite now, a soldier warns Captain, the field leader trying to keep the group alive, to look beyond the camp. Something crashes down through the desert cliffs, lands with a weapon driven through its body, and the message is not subtle. The enemy is already moving faster than the humans can regroup. Relief lasted about as long as that train's fuel budget. The danger expands from one horrifying arrival into a coordinated swarm descending from the sky. Reports confirm several thousand monsters are heading toward Army Camp A1, which turns the team's route problem into a frontline disaster. If A1 falls, this is not one squad getting trapped, it is a whole military position being cracked open. At Army Camp A1's outer battlefield, the sky becomes another killing lane as something drops through the military fire meant to stop it. The defense is hit hard, but the creature keeps coming until it lands among the convoy and turns the camp's controlled formation into burning chaos. A1 is not being raided, it is being tested, and the monsters are checking how much human firepower they can ignore. The creature survives the barrage, tears across the sand, and raises an arm toward the approaching armored vehicles, like it is giving a field order. That is the ugly confirmation Xiao warned about. The monsters are not merely attacking, they are coordinating movements in the middle of battle. When the enemy can command under fire, humanity's old defensive playbook starts looking painfully thin. Back with the human forces near the vehicles, a group announces that they come from Army Camp N3, but the welcome is pure rifle barrel. The soldiers at A1 order them not to move, and the white-haired soldier with them raises his hands because arriving alive from the monster direction now makes a person look guilty. In this war, survival itself has become suspicious, which is a very annoying reward for not dying. Xiao pushes the suspicion harder, accusing the white-haired soldier of being a traitor and threatening execution if he moves. Another soldier demands to know where they came from and why they crossed monster-held ground unharmed, just because the camp has learned the same lesson the hard way. Disguises are now battlefield weapons. Trust is collapsing exactly when the humans need it most. Before the standoff turns into friendly fire, a tall, scarred blonde man in a red-lined coat steps in and tells everyone to calm down. Recognizing the arriving soldiers, he admits it must have been difficult for them to reach the camp, which shifts the moment from execution to uneasy entry. Xiao has reached human lines, but the real problem follows him in. Every survivor may be a victim, a spy, or both. Inside the human-controlled camp, the scarred blonde officer explains why everyone is so jumpy. Camp N3 has already been abandoned. Its people pulled back to Army Camp A1, and the roads behind them are now packed with traps meant to slow the monster sea. One soldier realizes how bad this is, because giving up cities that cost absurd money is not a strategy meeting, it is a fire alarm with paperwork. Then the words monster gods land in the room, turning the evacuation from a local retreat into proof that something far higher up the food chain is moving. The scarred blonde officer does not welcome the arrivals as heroes. He puts them under investigation first, because in this war, even survivors can be weapons wearing a friendly face. He promises work only after they clear suspicion, but the camp is so short on manpower that even suspected people are already being counted as future tools. When he looks toward the caged white-haired soldier, that prisoner hints he may know the answer to everything, then turns away and leaves the camp sitting with a silence heavier than the bars. At Army Camp A1, the crisis widens fast. The Monster Sea is pressing in, the 5th supply batch arrives, and federal leaders come in person because this has stopped being a border problem. Officials step off aircraft while quarantine detainees clutch orders behind bars, which tells everyone the same thing. The camp is throwing every category of human at this disaster, respectable or not. When leadership starts mixing soldiers, officials, and prisoners, the plan is no longer clean, but clean plans have clearly left the building. At the perimeter, officers order strike teams to gather and move once the command drops, so the suspicious camp instantly becomes an active launch point. Squads line up in the rain while fighters face off across open ground. And the point is not ceremony, it is desperation dressed in formation. Humanity is preparing to hit back before the Monster Sea fully closes around A1. Inside the briefing, the officers admit the ugly part. They are sending professionals with low confidence in the people attached to them, hoping the mission itself forces results. Shao, the regressed protector, now choosing monstrous methods to save humanity, hears that the army has cracked the monster jamming problem and can hand out communicators with a 3-kilometer range to squad leaders. That small box matters more than it looks, since command and retreat are only possible if the teams can still talk after stepping into monster-held ground. The officers offer the squad some freedom to choose terrain, recommending target areas where the monsters are concentrating their attacks. Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, cuts through the advice and chooses the dangerous location himself, which makes the commander immediately question where he thinks he is going. Mask is not chasing comfort here. He is choosing the point that matters most, even if the mission looks like a meat grinder with a sign-in sheet. The commander presses the issue as a subordinate holds the dark mission box, and the answer is brutal. These two have been chosen for the most important job, because normal soldiers and redemption camp criminals would never obey under ordinary conditions. The plan depends on forcing desperate people into cooperation, with Mask and the other selected operative acting as the thin line between a strike force and a riot with rifles. The scarred blonde officer warns that who gets wiped out will depend on their combined efforts, so the mission's real enemy is not only the monsters outside, but the humans who may break before reaching them. 2 hours later, near the operation zone, the fear finally spills out as one soldier says the quiet part repeatedly. This plan is going to get them killed. He points out the impossible math, with only a handful of them expected to move alongside redemption camp criminals toward a deadly target, but Mask refuses to let panic become the final order. He opens the box and reveals the real stake of the mission: 2 miniature nuclear devices, meaning this is not a rescue or a patrol anymore. It is a gamble to erase the threat before the threat erases them. Captain, the field leader trying to keep this suicide plan from turning into a riot, hands out the device assignments and orders the team to install them at the marked map locations with him. That means the miniature nukes are now more than a threat in a box. They are a job with coordinates, carriers, and a very ugly failure condition. Drake, a prison-hardened convict drafted into the redemption force, steps in like he has been waiting his whole life for a mission where manners are optional. He sizes up the other prisoners and tells them he likes the look in their eyes, which is a polite way of saying the operation has chosen violence as a management style. One prisoner immediately tests Drake by pulling a gun and threatening him, so Drake answers with a shot and reminds him that whatever he did back in prison still follows him here. The lesson lands fast. These criminals may hate the mission, but Drake makes it clear rebellion will get them killed before the monsters even clock in. Another prisoner switches targets and threatens Captain and the blonde soldier beside him, thinking the officials will be softer prey than Drake. Captain shuts that idea down himself, because if the convicts smell weakness now, the whole nuclear operation collapses before it starts. Captain blasts the offender until the man can only scream, then leaves him broken enough to make the point for everyone else. Drake accepts the result, but warns Captain not to make a habit of acting first and explaining later, which is rich coming from a man running discipline by bullet receipt. Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power and forced into this desperate mission, finally shows the prisoners what real command looks like. He draws his weapon and creates a crater-sized warning, turning fear of the enemy into fear of disobeying him. Mask gives the captured soldiers the only choice this battlefield allows: follow his orders or die surrounded, with monsters closing 3 sides and the north road blocked. One soldier cowers under him, but the message is for all of them: survival now belongs to whoever can obey under terror. Now the operation moves from coercion to execution as explosions tear across the battlefield, and the military vehicles fire back to keep the route alive. A horned monster smashes into the line while more creatures pour in from the terrain, so the prisoner-led plan stops being theoretical and starts spending lives. A reporting soldier confirms the worst news: the defenses are overrun and the force is completely surrounded. The prisoners explode in anger because they understand the math now. Mask is asking condemned men to walk into a monster wall while carrying humanity's last dirty trick. Mask does not soften the order, he raises the promise instead, saying he will lead them to survival and create a miracle. The prisoners fall silent because that is the terrible hook of his command. He is not offering mercy, only a chance to live if they gamble everything on him. Command then locks the mission around the walkie-talkies, declaring the radios more important than the soldiers carrying them. The group split by direction and timing, which means the battlefield is becoming a remote-controlled maze where one lost signal can waste a nuke and doom the route. One soldier reports that he can install the clear devices and connect the tripwires at the marked areas, so the plan finally has hands on the actual mechanism. Then the radio spits static and the next report kills any comfort. Many monsters are already being detected nearby. The line starts retreating in a hurry as Command calls for plane evacuation from the army camp, but Mask's side still has to keep the trap alive. Orders fly through the radio, with one group pulling back southwest, while another advances northeast to throw the tactical payload, forcing the soldiers to retreat and attack at the same time. At the river line, the soldiers know the trap only works if they can find the enemy before it finds them, so one of them asks for remote sensing, and basically admits their eyes are not enough anymore. They move into position across the water, but the armored creatures start crossing first, which turns the ambush into a countdown with boots on wet ground and panic in the radio. Captain, the field leader trying to keep Xiao's prisoner-led plan from collapsing, stops conserving explosives and orders every grenade thrown. The barrage should buy distance, but when the smoke clears, the skeleton is still standing, charred and furious, which tells the soldiers their normal weapons are now negotiating with a brick wall. Because the skeleton survives the first answer, Captain escalates to the remote mines and times the detonation by radio. The blast should seal the route, but the skeleton escapes through it, proving this thing is not just durable, it can read a battlefield well enough to ruin a plan that already cost them nerves, explosives, and probably several years of sleep. Captain responds by splitting the military groups into new angles, forcing the creature to chase multiple threats instead of one clean target. The soldiers advance anyway, and when they realize the skeleton calculated their meeting point, their fear sharpens into one ugly fact. This mission is not a hunt, it is a chess match with teeth. Still, the formation holds long enough for Hope to creep back in, and that is dangerous because Hope makes people stand their ground. Captain orders another full grenade throw. The skeleton pushes through the punishment, and the soldiers only survive because the explosions are buying seconds, not because they are winning. The mission finally hits its real objective. The soldiers lure the skeleton where Xiao needs it, and the induction task succeeds. The survivors return to the mountaintop in scattered pairs and tiny groups, which is the military version of a group project where everyone looks shocked they still have legs. On the mountaintop, Xiao, the regressed protector willing to become a monster for humanity, leaves the finishing move to Captain's power and the miniature nuclear bombs hidden around the hot spring. The result is not a simple explosion, but a weaponized flood, ripping loose water, rock, and trees until the mountain itself becomes the trap. That avalanche changes the whole battle, because the monsters near the peak cannot fight terrain that has turned against them. Water swallows the first wave, corpses and debris make the surge even larger, and Xiao's tactic proves his cruelest strength again. He does not need to beat every monster by hand if he can make the battlefield execute them for him. After that victory, the story shifts to Dead End, where the cost of the operation starts leaking out from behind the official version. Authorities discover the team was built from redemption camp criminals, and the criminals learn their work has been snatched off television, so the people who risk death are denied even the dirty little prize of public credit. Inside Dead End, resentment turns violent, and the prisoners' clash exposes the uglier machinery under the frontline war. These men are being used as tools, then managed like problems when they survive. This is where the crisis stops looking like soldiers versus monsters, and starts looking like the military eating its own spare parts. At Army Camp A1, the commander-in-chief, a military leader now facing the fallout, demands to know why prisoners were dragged back from the front just to die in what looks like a game. His officer denies it and blames the prisoners for starting violence on purpose, which is a very neat explanation from someone standing far away from the bodies. The officer adds that 3 outsiders from other army camps were present and promises surveillance, so the investigation quietly turns from justice into containment. A red-haired person smooths it over by saying there were reasons for everything, gets agreement that it will not happen again, and the frontline crisis stays buried under discipline instead of solved. At the frontline now, the army stops talking about the crisis and starts testing its answers. Special weapons meant to break the monster pressure before the cities behind them get swallowed. One officer worries the line is already too tense for another gamble, but the reply is chillingly simple. The weapons should already be there. The soldiers fire those special weapons into the battlefield, hoping technology can buy what manpower no longer can. For a second, the explosions look like control, but the monsters keep coming, which is usually the moment a military plan starts sweating through its uniform. The front line realizes the new weapons have not ended the problem. They have only announced where the humans are hiding. Panic spreads through the trench, the commander orders a second defensive line, and a soldier argues that retreat means abandoning both their effort and the support staff waiting near the city. Then the real nightmare steps in. Not an ordinary beast wave, but a force that tells the soldiers to run before it moves in. These dark, altered creatures advance like the army has opened a cage it cannot close again. The experiment works in the narrowest, ugliest sense. Someone confirms the creature can attack, and the armored thing starts taking orders. That matters because the military is no longer just fighting monsters, it is fielding human-made monster weapons, and pretending the difference is paperwork. A handler raises an injection device, and the creature's body answers like a machine being forced past its safe limit. The weapon convulses, lashes out and proves the army has found a way to manufacture power, along with a fresh list of reasons everyone nearby should update their will. When the impact clears, the creature is still standing, which tells the soldiers the test is not failing. It is succeeding in the worst possible direction. The surge that follows turns the battlefield into proof that these weapons can dominate, but nobody can honestly claim they are still cleanly on humanity's side. Human fighters rush in with blades and screams, trying to reclaim the battle through courage. The creature counters them anyway, so bravery stops looking heroic and starts looking like men being fed into a machine with better teeth. A calm observer finally says the quiet part out loud. If the situation is already this kind of war, then the soldiers themselves are weapons shaped like humans. That line cuts straight into Xiao's world, because he has been condemned for becoming monstrous, while the army is mass-producing the same idea and calling it strategy. The battlefield erupts again, and the enhanced creature overpowers what stands against it. Instead of protecting humanity with dignity, the front line is learning that survival may mean building monsters to kill monsters, then acting surprised when someone asks who the monsters are. Another warrior with a massive sword pushes forward into the horde, choosing direct combat instead of retreat. The charge looks insane from the outside, but the point is not discipline anymore. It is to draw out power in the one place where hesitation gets people eaten. Two observers watch the warriors dive into the sea of monsters, and one explains the logic. Only inside that pressure can their true power show itself, because here their abilities have been restricted. For Xiao, that is the frontline lesson in miniature. The world only rewards strength when it is already too late to use anything gentler. Surrounded on the battlefield, the warrior ends up caught inside a monster's jaws or grip, and complains that it is suffocating. It is a ridiculous thing to grumble about while being chewed like field ration, but it also proves the point. These fighters are being pushed into conditions no normal human should survive. On the frontline, the Fire Skull entity realizes the enhanced warrior carries a familiar aura, but it shuts down the comparison fast. This is not borrowed strength, it is its own power finally coming loose. That matters because the experiment is no longer just surviving the monster sea. It is provoking something that wants an audience before it starts tearing people apart. The field command answers that threat with the second injection, which means the military has already planned for humans to be pushed past the normal limit. The enhanced warrior's body mutates under the dose, and the result is less soldier, more battlefield equipment with a pulse. Terrible medical ethics, excellent nightmare fuel. The transformation keeps unfolding until the experiment reveals what the army has really built. A human weapon close enough to the dragon and the monsters around it to fight them on their own terms. Once that thing announces the massacre, the frontline stops being a defensive test and becomes proof that humanity is copying the enemy to survive. The enhanced force finally turns the battlefield, smashing through the monster swarm and killing fast enough to make the sea of monsters pull back. A human observer can barely believe it because 100 modified fighters just forced back a threat that normally drowns armies, which is exactly the kind of result that makes commanders forget every warning label on the syringe. The field commander calls the experiment a success, and the ugly truth lands clean. Surgery and drugs can turn ordinary people into powerful professionals. For Xiao, this is the world choosing his same brutal logic without admitting it. Sacrifice the human shape first, argue about morality after the corpses are counted. Back on the battlefield, one enhanced warrior keeps marching instead of celebrating, driven forward by whatever the procedure has awakened inside him. He attacks with a mutated limb, and the victory immediately starts looking unstable, because a weapon that needs constant violence is not exactly something you park neatly in storage. The field commander studies the captured enhanced warrior and decides he is valuable enough to keep, especially with that rare power level. But the warrior is already begging for fresh monster blood to cool the burning in his heart, so the commander orders a checkup instead of letting him rush to the next defense line, then notices something on the ground that turns his control room confidence into alarm. The new crisis rises over the battlefield, an enormous creature built from dead monster bodies, a walking pile of everything the front line failed to bury. The field commander identifies what it is, but the enhanced warrior does not care about the details, because to him the rule has become brutally simple. If it is a monster, he kills it. The enhanced warrior launches himself at the corpse-built creature, sword raised, choosing attack before anyone can measure the risk. The creature answers with overwhelming force, and the front line gets its next problem. Humanity's new monster killers may be strong enough to win battles, but the war is now producing horrors faster than command can understand them. On the front line, the enhanced soldier's attack finally makes the corpse-built creature react, but the watching officer immediately clocks the bad news. These are 8th rank monsters, maybe even 9th rank. That means this is no longer a cleanup fight. It is a test of whether the military's new human weapons can survive the kind of enemy that usually deletes squads. Inside the battlefield cavern, another enhanced soldier hits the real dilemma of this program. If he injects the medication in public, everyone sees what the army has been hiding, but if he does not, he dies. He chooses survival, tells himself monsters are trash, and takes the shot anyway, which is a bold little medical decision for a place currently full of claws. The drug works, but it does not look like a clean upgrade. The soldier's body twists under the enhancement while the battle keeps grinding on, and the military's secret starts looking less like super soldier science and more like humans being pushed halfway into monster territory. Then the experiment crosses the line completely. A massive monster bursts into the fight, soldiers panic, and one of them says the thing everyone is thinking. Someone has turned into a monster. The transformed soldier rises like he still wants to fight, but his his own body refuses to obey. When observers notice the monster's hand will not move, the horror gets sharper. This is not just a battlefield mutation, it is a trapped human being inside a weaponized body. He strains against himself, raises those massive limbs, and then breaks down in pain instead of attacking. The army wanted power on demand, but the result is a soldier begging for it to stop, which is not exactly the recruitment poster version. The transformed soldier gets destroyed, and the survivors are left wearing the proof. One blood-soaked witness finally understands the point. This transformation was intentional, so the frontline crisis is not only monsters invading, it is humans manufacturing disasters too. Across the fortifications, soldiers still have to march toward the enormous threat, while knowing monsters enjoy hunting humans. That is the cruel part of this war. Even after exposing the experiment, nobody gets to stop and process it, because the next giant problem is already leaning over the wall. Back inside the command structure, reports make the situation worse. 9th rank monsters are appearing in large numbers, and the radio signal is breaking apart under interference. The officer running through the building is not chasing a rumor anymore. He is trying to keep command from going blind during a mass attack. Outside over the military base, the scale finally lands. The monster barrier and the battlefield are swallowing the area faster than command can coordinate. This is the kind of collapse that gets blamed on one famous scapegoat, even when the army's own experiments are bleeding all over the evidence. At command, a masked officer explains that monster gods are supposed to be supervised, but they are moving freely while masked. The disgraced hero stripped of power is absent. He catches himself too late after saying the name, and the silence around it says plenty. Even stripped of status, Mask is still the shadow everyone measures this disaster against. The officials choose the cleanest story for the public, and blame Mask for acting recklessly and creating the current frontline state. Then they count their remaining force, 47th rank fighters and 15 registered 8th rank fighters, plus 1 unregistered Zhang Zhengye, which sounds impressive until the battlefield has already started shopping in 9th rank bulk. At command, the officers try to convince themselves the numbers still work. 7th rank fighters with cannon support might hold the line against monster attacks. But that confidence is already cracked, because their plan depends on soldiers surviving a battlefield that keeps producing problems above their pay grade. The discussion turns uglier when nuclear weapons enter the room as a serious option, only to hit the obvious wall. Their own troops are still out there. Then one official points to Songming's Federation approval as the clean shortcut, which tells Yao the leadership is already looking for a button to press from a comfortable distance. Back on the front line, that cold paperwork becomes Xiao's immediate problem when a colossal monster drops into his path and forces a raw shout out of him. The command room can argue about acceptable casualties, but Xiao is the casualty standing under the thing. The monster fully reveals itself, and the scale alone changes the fight. This is not a target to defeat cleanly, it is a disaster Xiao has to stop from moving forward. Its reach carves across the wasteland, and every motion says the same thing. The line breaks if Xiao gives ground. Xiao meets the creature head-on because retreat means letting the front line get swallowed behind him. He blocks and deflects just enough to stay alive, but the impact tears the ground apart, which is a rude way to learn that being brave does not make physics negotiable. The monster keeps pressing from above, and Xiao settles into a defensive stance with both swords, because he cannot overpower it yet. For the first time in this stretch, his monster's path runs into a simple limit. He chose power, but this thing has more of it. Then Xiao laughs, not because the situation improves, but because he refuses to let fear decide the fight. The monster reaches for a fleeing survivor, and Xiao's reaction proves what the officials keep missing. Whatever he is becoming, he is still the one stepping between humans and extinction. The creature sweeps through the battlefield and finally sends Xiao flying, turning his defense into survival. He stabilizes before the chase can finish him, but the exchange makes one thing plain. An 8th rank monster is not something his current strength can casually handle. Xiao takes the riskier route and drives himself into the monster's own grasp, using its attack as his opening instead of running from it. That choice costs him control of the fight, but it buys enough time to pull the wounded survivor out before the battlefield collapses around them. In the wreckage, Xiao's altered face makes the rescue feel almost worse for anyone watching, because the savior looks closer to the nightmare than the victim. He tells the survivor the hard truth. The current version of them cannot face an 8th rank monster, and he says it like a diagnosis, not an insult. Then Xiao corrects the survivor's earlier shock and draws his weapon again, making his real position brutally clear. He does not want to die here, so he will use whatever monstrous power keeps him standing, even if every witness files that under terrifying behavior. The monster descends again before anyone can process the warning, spreading its tendrils over the ruined ground. Xiao has no room left for speeches now. Either his new path holds against this 8th rank pressure, or the front line gets another grave with his name on it. On the front line now, Xiao has stopped pretending this is a normal battle. His human reputation is already burning, and the only thing left to protect is humanity itself. So when he fully gives shape to the dragon-like power inside him and says it is time to end this, he is not making a threat. He is choosing the title everyone forced onto him, Drake. Xiao stands before the survivor in that transformed state, and the survivor finally understands the problem is bigger than one 8th rank enemy. He stammers Xiao's name like he is checking whether the person in front of him still counts as the same guy, which is fair since the answer is now doing heavy overtime. The enemy tries to punch through Xiao's defenses and finish the front line before anyone can run, but Xiao answers by meeting the attack head-on instead of retreating. That matters because this is the first proof that his monster's choice is not only frightening, it actually works against power that should have crushed them. For a moment, the monster traps Xiao and tries to turn his new form into a cage, but he tears free before the fight can become an execution. The exchange proves the enemy can still restrain him, yet not control him, and that difference is the thin line keeping everyone nearby alive. Xiao's monster form gathers itself again, and this time he stops trading pressure and commits to ending the creature outright. He pours everything into one overwhelming attack, not to look heroic, but to remove the threat before the front line pays for his hesitation. The battlefield gets swallowed by Xiao's finishing strike, and when the force finally clears, the terrifying monster is simply gone. Xiao remains on the barren ground afterward, which is the kind of rescue that makes everyone grateful for about 3 seconds before they remember who did it. The soldiers react with stunned relief, but the report immediately poisons the victory. The being who eliminated the monster is the humanoid monster from Dahe City, a city where Xiao once searched for housing before becoming a walking national emergency. An official hears that Xiao may be a modified human and instantly thinks laboratory capture, so the people he just saved start measuring him for a cage instead of a medal. The victory mutates into a larger betrayal when the commander-in-chief, the military leader at Army Camp A1, receives word that a tactical nuclear weapon has already been launched. The soldiers realize too late that the strike is bait for monsters, and that they are trapped inside the lure, which means the command structure has decided their lives are cheaper than the chance to draw out a bigger enemy. The commander-in-chief gives the only comfort a doomed soldier can hate hearing: their sacrifice will not be in vain, and humanity will remember them. Then the nuclear strike falls, but instead of closing the disaster, it helps open the sky for a higher calamity as the bloodthirsty great white shark demon god appears over Earth, turning Xiao's hard-won monster kill into the opening bell of something far worse. At Army Camp A1, the nuclear strike does not end the nightmare, because the detonation helps tear open the path for a demon god to manifest on Earth. The soldiers understand the rule immediately. Calamity-level monsters are already disasters, but compared to a demon god, they are basically minnows slipping through a net with teeth. Then the name lands, the bloodthirsty great white shark, and everyone realizes humanity just upgraded the apocalypse by accident. After the bloodthirsty great white shark appears, the war stops being only a battlefield problem and becomes a political fracture. The Federation's peace faction rises while the war faction is pushed down, which means the people in charge are no longer arguing how to win, but whether fighting at all is suicidal. That split becomes one of the cracks that rots the leadership from the top. Humanity still tries the biggest answer it has left: more nuclear firepower thrown at the demon god. But the bloodthirsty great white shark does not need to tank the attack to prove dominance, because it simply transfers the nuclear bombs away and turns mankind's trump card into a very expensive disappearing act. Inside command, the officers finally say the quiet part out loud. They cannot even summon the will to face this thing. Song, an officer caught in the collapsing frontline crisis, announces he is leaving, and the reaction is immediate because it sounds less like strategy and more like survival with a uniform on. Back on the frontline, the battle devolves from organized defense into raw terror, as fighters stare at a new monstrous presence and ask what it even is. The answer comes fast. Whatever stands before them is not another target to eliminate, but a force that makes nearby beasts move like the battlefield belongs to them. At this point, human weapons are still present, but confidence has packed a bag and left before Song did. The monsters press the advantage, and the humans caught in their reach stop looking like soldiers and start looking like evidence. One fighter is trapped, blasted aside, and the exchange proves the same brutal lesson as the failed nukes. Ordinary resistance cannot control what has arrived. That is where Xiao makes the choice that defines him again. Xiao, the regressed protector who already gave up being seen as a hero, leans into the monstrous power inside him, because saving humanity on polite terms is no longer on the table. If mankind cannot answer a demon god as humans, Xiao will answer it as the monster they always accused him of being. And the gamble works in the worst possible way. The monstrous entity notices him. The observer realizes the demon god's gaze has fixed on Xiao, which means our boy has succeeded in drawing attention from a god-level predator. A win that comes with the tiny downside of being noticed by a god-level predator. The observer tries to make sense of the impossible. A Drake god strong enough to summon a 9th-rank calamity should not waste attention on one human. Then the answer lands, and it is Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, whose presence somehow drags that god-level threat into focus. A vast presence opens above the battlefield, and Mask realizes he has not just been noticed, he has become the problem the Drakes are suddenly reacting to. Mask reads the monster god's reaction and catches the real turn. It is scared. That fear matters more than any weapon, because the enemy that was supposed to overwhelm humanity is now choosing distance over domination. The god-level presence changes shape, slips away, and leaves Mask with the rare battlefield achievement of terrifying the thing that came to terrify everyone else. Because Mask rattles the golem god, the golems and the remaining golems begin pulling back instead of pressing the slaughter. Mask chases the retreat for a moment, but even he cannot explain why the monsters suddenly give up ground. The soldiers celebrate like they planned it all along, which is bold for men whose strategy was mainly standing near disaster and hoping it got bored. From the ruined battlefield, Xiao emerges and privately judges one soldier exactly as cowardly as he remembers, which tells us this regression is still confirming his worst memories of humanity. Inside the monster god's void now, Xiao thinks of treacherous wisdom, the demon god whose blood empowers Blood Raven, and remembers that in the previous world it hid from him. But this time Xiao is weaker, so treacherous wisdom should see his current body as easy prey, and that forces Xiao to hold back a violent surge that wants to consume and destroy everything around him. Back among the humans now, Xiao's bigger problem becomes political, not monstrous. Armed men surround him while one voice still insists he is human. Congressman Song, a political authority backing the soldiers, rejects that defense and brands Xiao a monster's lapdog, so the military line hardens against the very person trying to keep mankind alive. This is the split in plain terms. Humanity cannot answer the demon god, but it can absolutely point rifles at Xiao. The officer orders silence, and the soldiers prepare to enforce that verdict, which means Xiao is no longer being judged, he is being contained. Surrounded in the arena, Xiao chooses the answer they have been daring him to give and lets his monstrous power rise instead of begging to be understood. If they only accept strength from monsters, then our boy stops wasting breath on the human costume. Xiao breaks their formation at once, proving the soldiers were never prepared for the thing they kept accusing him of being. Congressman Song sees the power and shouts that Xiao has finally shown his true nature, but the accusation loses its bite when Xiao answers by hurling him aside. It is a very fast debate, and Song contributes mostly flight time. With the human chain of command collapsing, Xiao's monster form fully asserts itself, and the confrontation stops being an arrest attempt. The power he unleashes tears through the defenders, lifts one man helplessly, and leaves blood on the ground as the cost of forcing Xiao into the role they feared. By the end, the humans have not exposed a hidden monster. They have helped create the one standing in front of them. The wounded soldier begging on the ground proves the human side has already lost control of this arrest. But Xiao does not soften. He stares them down with the resolve of a man who has stopped asking humans to understand him. And that choice turns the battlefield into his declaration. Commander-in-Chief, the military leader at Army Camp A1, still tries to keep command by ordering soldiers forward, even when one of them basically asks if the boss plans to participate in his own suicide mission. So Commander-in-Chief charges in himself, trying to prove humanity's chain of command can still stand in front of Xiao. Xiao mocks Commander-in-Chief for hesitating, because fear is exactly the weakness Xiao thinks doomed humanity the first time. When Commander-in-Chief asks what he is planning, Xiao gives the answer everyone has been forcing onto him. He is doing what a monster should do. That answer matters more than the attack itself, because Xiao stops defending his innocence and accepts the role they named for him. His full monster form stands over the field, and the humans finally understand that branding him a monster has not contained him. It has removed his last reason to act like one of them. Elsewhere at the army command, a masked operative reports in late to the army chief, and the conversation immediately shifts from panic to conspiracy. The operative says his sharpened senses let him recognize the truth early, then acknowledges Mask, the disgraced hero stripped of power, has returned. The operative lays out the real danger behind the battlefield. An old guard is waiting in Star City to use Mask as the center of a power grab, cutting through Congress and pulling armies and cities under one banner. Mask's return is not just a comeback story, it is a loaded weapon being handed to people who want the whole system for themselves. Back on the wasteland, Xiao rises into something too large for a normal military response, and the destruction spreads with him. The point is brutal and simple. If humanity answers him only with fear and force, he will answer as the monster strong enough to survive both. After Xiao's rampage, the Federation turns the crisis into a public speech, with Commander-in-Chief announcing massive demon casualties and calling it a victory bought by sacrifice. But he also reveals the poison inside that victory, betrayal and sabotage from within, which means the war is no longer humans versus monsters, it is humans trying to decide who still counts as human. He Rao, the public speaker pushing the next confrontation, steps forward as a normal human and frames the danger as something that threatens everyone. An enforcer has to shout the crowd quiet, which tells you the message is working, but not in the calm civic discussion way anyone would put on a brochure. Rao rewrites the whole disaster into a clean public narrative. Heroes fought monsters, some fighters were monster saboteurs, and any human helping them will be hunted. He promises fair trials and no false accusations, which sounds noble until you remember this society has already decided what Xiao is before asking why he became it. In Star City, on a rooftop above that public fear, a cameraman records the moment the propaganda finds a target. A lone fighter appears under targeting marks with a sword ready, and the crowd instantly proves Rao's speech has done its job by screaming monster, before asking a single question. The armed humans swarm the rooftop fighter, yelling that he dares show his face in Star City, but he stays calm instead of panicking. That calm is the cliff edge of the scene. The public has been primed to attack first, and the next fight will decide whether this hunted figure is victim, traitor, or the spark that drags Mask's return into the open. On the Star City rooftop, Mask, the disgraced hero everyone has been trained to fear, answers the mob's attack with brutal control instead of speeches. The humans want a clean victory over a branded monster, but he cuts through their rush so fast their courage starts looking rented. Mask tries to keep the operation from turning into panic, telling his ally that reinforcements are close and the situation is still manageable. Then the rooftop answers him with bodies on the ground, which means the propaganda machine has not sent saviors here, it has sent people to get broken for the broadcast. The confrontation spills into a public arena atmosphere, where the crowd gets exactly what Rao has been selling them: a stage, a villain, and permission to cheer for violence. When Xiao, the regress protector now walking the monster's path to save humanity his own way, is identified, the fight stops being only about Mask and becomes a public judgment on every monster-tainted savior humanity refuses to understand. Xiao's presence drags old guilt into the open, because the story between these men is not clean hero versus villain. They once stood on the same side in battle, but impeachment and fear turned former allies into proof that humanity loves its protectors, right up until those protectors become inconvenient. He Rao's real wound is not strategy, it is comparison. He doubts Xiao would ever see him as an equal, and he knows the public myth of Mask still towers over him. That is why the cheering matters, because He Rao is not only chasing justice here, he is chasing the kind of worship that makes a man forget he is insecure in formal clothes. So He Rao turns that insecurity into a mission and decides this is his chance to prove himself by defeating Mask. The fight now has a sharper stake. If He Rao wins, the propaganda gets its perfect ending, and if he fails, the monster they condemned survives another public execution. He Rao pushes closer to Mask and demands action before time runs out, which means hesitation is no longer an option for either side. Mask becomes the obstacle He Rao must overcome to validate everything he has preached, while Mask's survival threatens to expose how thin that righteous performance really is. Elsewhere, the conflict mutates from public violence into open worship as followers bow and chant for Mask like he is no longer a man but a throne with a pulse. That devotion becomes the next escalation, because someone answers the fear and faith by calling the monster gods to